It's 8:30 and we'll do a quick roll call. Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Martha Whitmore,
Present.
Chandler Henry,
Present.
Mark Rober,
I'm here.
Steve Woodley,
Present.
Mike Richard,
Here.
Kathleen Curry,
Here.
Ann Winery, Scott McGinnis,
Here.
Tom Gray,
Here.
Mark Catlin, John Ely,
Here.
Alden Vandenbrink,
Here.
Doug Monger,
Here.
Ruby Hazard, Taylor House.
We do have a quorum. And as we mentioned yesterday, Bob Herford had something important come up, that emergency come up that prevents him from being here. So we are skipping that agenda item. And we will start right into community funding partnership. Amy, would you like to take it away?
My Zoom is.
Unless there are any other morning announcements, anyone here?
Get a page somewhere out here.
I'm sorry.
226. Yeah, 223.
Thank you.
Yes, Stephanie, please reflect that Commissioner Winter or Director Winter is here.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure our slides were connected to the Zoom. Thank you, Madam Chair. Amy Moyer, Director of Strategic Partnerships with the district. I have 7 action items. That looks like my- Slides are not. Okay, we will work with our tech, but I do have 7 action items. So hang with me for about 584,000 in recommended funding today from our community funding partnership. Madam Chair, I'll go through each of the projects individually and take the action items one by one. You may notice that we do have 2 projects that are recommended funding levels less than 50,000. I will talk about those cases individually and the reasoning behind why we are bringing them to the board today. But again, a good slate of projects representative of different communities across our district, representative of different funding categories. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. And then at the end, I am going to talk a little bit about the portion of the memo discussing our role in looking at where we can provide value with the bipartisan infrastructure law opportunities, and particularly how we might use our community funding partnership in that realm to support our projects. Let me see if I can figure out this delay. I've been advancing this slide. There we go. Perfect. So the first project we have is in Summit County from the Buffalo Mountain Metropolitan District. It's for their water tank 3. It's a rehab project. Just to back up, the Buffalo Mountain Metropolitan District is located west of Silverthorne. It provides water to nearly 2,500 residential units, condominiums, and commercial properties. The project is to rehabilitate the district's below grade. It's 150,000 gallon capacity steel water storage tank that was constructed in 1970. So it's well past its useful life. It has significant corrosion buildup, surface loss, and the original coating system within the tank is failing. So the interior rehab project will protect the structural integrity of this water storage tank and prevent future leaks from their water supply from the Blue River aquifer. So you can see some of the pictures of the interior of the tank. The project benefits are again to repair the deficient water storage tank. It supports the drinking water supply for this community and allows for the use of the storage tank for another 15 to 20 years. For this project, we've also been supportive of working with the Buffalo Mountain Metropolitan District on some of their conservation and efficiency goals. So we've talked with them about their efforts in that arena to install daily leak detection metering within their system, which over since 2018, they've estimated has saved 221 million gallons and 677 acre feet. So we've been very supportive of the strong efforts that this community has taken to get that buy-in from the residents, also from the conservation and efficiency arena. And they've also installed groundwater well monitoring equipment to control how they pump out of the Blue River aquifer system. So we're looking forward to working with them on their progress in the conservation and efficiency realm going forward. This project, like Director Haas mentioned yesterday, does have strong support from the Summit County Board of County Commissioners that again supported the district's strong stance in the conservation and efficiency arena. And then finally, we were supportive of this project because this district has implemented a rate study, they've implemented rate increases, and they have a strong capital improvement plan that they're working towards. So seeing those long-term planning efforts coupled with these conservation and efficiency efforts of this community really spoke strongly during our review process. We are recommending a partial funding for this project. They initially requested $170,000 for this project. We are recommending a significant reduction to $25,000 that I do want to talk a little bit about before you move into taking action on this project. And so partial funding does represent about 10% of the total project cost. But again, our funding award intends to acknowledge all of the progress that this community has made in the conservation and efficiency realm. It recognizes their efforts to plan into the future. It recognizes their efforts to implement a rate study to maintain their system and continue to identify improvements. And so before, again, we move into the action item, there are two pieces of this proposal that would benefit some board discussion. And the first is the district's role and our role of our community funding partnership in supporting drinking water endeavors and supporting municipal water projects. We know that there are lots of needs across our district in this realm, and it is included within our framework, and what we have said is that we would support as part of the ballot question 7-8 funds. But we want to keep in mind that these projects are expensive. There is an opportunity that they could dominate in the grand scheme of things, limited funds that we have. And so when you look at our recommendation and when we've looked at similar projects, we have been more so in the 10% and the lower cost share range to support projects that have some of these added components of, we're seeing the communities that have their long-term capital plans. We want to support communities that are moving to conservation and efficiency projects, but we did want to bring it to discussion for the board to gather any input on, is this the right approach we should be taking? Are there any other thoughts on how we approach municipal water infrastructure projects like this and like ones we've seen in the past and like projects we'll talk about here as we go forward today?
And so you're ready for action on this item? Okay. Before we go to a motion, does anyone have any questions for Amy? Yes, Director McGinnis.
Not a question, but I thought she was asking for
Yes, I think too.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you're absolutely right. Although we're a couple of years old or whatever, we're still a new bank in town. So people just throw out numbers, and I think the burden sharing, one, it gets the communities to adopt this. And, the comments is a good way to do it versus just, once you open the checkbook, that's what we want. We want people to come to us, but we want to realize that there's only so much we can do to get around. So I think it's a great policy that you're following.
Yes, Director Curry.
Just to follow on with that, so do you ask the applicants if they've applied for a loan from Water and Power Development Authority? And because I know that drinking water revolving loan fund, they get a lot more applicants than they have dollars for. But I'm assuming they wanted a grant, not a loan.
We do often connect projects like this with the Department of Local Affairs and CDPG on the SRF program, and especially keying into that program is getting a lot of money from the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we do really push our applicants, especially for filling the remaining funding gap. For this district in particular, they have worked through, I believe, the SRF program for some of their larger capital needs and are working to implement this rehabilitation project through their own capital reserves and in hopes of having some support from the river district. But we are making those connections more and more and making sure that folks in our district are connected to their regional manager with the Department of Local Affairs and are keyed into what may happen with the SRF program as it gets additional infusion.
Because they do a fee. I mean, they can roll some of it back to ratepayers. So I'm assuming they went through that whole exercise and just really needed help at a grant level for a portion. But this is, if there's ever been a good year for getting money for drinking water, this is it. Government money. But maybe as long as we're asking those questions, I think she's on target with the 10%.
Yes, Director Winter.
So actually, I mean, in this particular one, as I look at the number, I mean, they're gonna put in 71,000, they asked for 170, right? Which is 240 roughly. But if you give 10% and they're unable to raise the rest of the money, I guess the real question is how long does that 10%, whatever that number is, in this case, it's 75,000, how long does it sit there is a logistical question for them to either raise the rest of the capital to do the project? Is there a cutoff line that you have to spend it by December 31st or whatever that number is? That's one of my question, I guess. And so we can either take the money back and fly somewhere else.
Yep, those are great questions, Director Winery. We do talk with the applicants about partial funding and what that does to the project timelines. So in this particular instance, the community is able to dip farther into their reserves to get this project done. But in a standard case, our standard timeline for contracting for projects is 3 years. So typically we award projects 3 years from the award letter date, and say you have 3 years to implement this project. We try not to be a black and white funding program of here's our funding and good luck. We try to facilitate conversations to fill those funding gaps so that these projects get done. That help?
Yeah, no, I mean, in today's economy, to be very honest, if you ain't got a contractor, I mean, I'm in that line of business. I can't even get, somebody won't even give you a quote. If you want to pay for it today, you can buy it, maybe. If you try to say, I'm gonna get it next month, you might as well try to get it right on the space shuttle because they're not gonna do that.
I'm gonna go to Monger and then Beckley and then Vandenbrink.
So Amy and I kind of had this conversation yesterday at a little bit of lunch. I appreciate this, the conversation. I mean, there's a difference between need and not responsibility and you know, taking care of business at home, especially with rate pay and water business, you know, and so I don't know, it's kind of an arbitrary thing to come up and say, well, it's 23 or 25, you know, so I don't know where that magic number is, but it isn't that we pay 170. And again, I've always had this concern, and we still have the concern now, is that, so we give you some money today to fix the problem today. So how do we know that you're gonna be, and these are not financial decisions, there are a lot of them are political decisions too, based on rates. I mean, no, those are political decisions, whether you like it or not. I've been in the business, so you know, those are political decisions. The boards and the things have to toe the line and make sure that, you know, that you always have that effort and responsibility and respectability that you're going to be able to provide, and that you're not getting caught. I mean, setting money aside for the next time and for whatever, and have some fun. So while the 25 or 23s make me a little arbitrary, I don't know how you throw a dart at the wall and see where it lands and see how much it is, but I'm respectful of the conversation here, and I assume you've had conversations with them, and you know, it's, as they say, it's better than a stick in the eye, so good to go.
Director Becker.
So I'm very supportive of your 10%. And the reason is because, you know, these funds are for projects that are hard to fund, I believe. And when I look at 2,500 households, that's $100 per household to fund this whole project. That seems like that should be something that's handled within that community versus a lot of projects that are difficult to fund. So I do applaud the $25,000 for conservation and some of the things that go around it. I think that, you know, the homeowners also have to take some of the responsibility for this project also.
Director Vandenbrink.
I'm not going to repeat support, but I think you're going to start seeing more of these requests. I've already seen several tanks come through here, but within the past 8 years, the state has adjusted rules that require all distribution water storage facilities be inspected on an annual basis. That's going to start showing considerable deficiencies within our drinking water world. But not only on top of that, you're also going to be running into different contaminants, and I'm using that term pretty broadly here. That's going to be coming up into this as well. So the grab and the need to outsource for additional funding is going to continue to grow, because these rules are not getting any lighter, they're getting harder to meet. So I look back to where, just like they said, you got to go back to the ratepayers. They have the ability to do a utility adjustments, and I think what you approached there is very appropriate.
And Madam Chair, I do have a procedural question, perhaps before we get to the action item of, you may notice that our recommended amount is within our general manager's authority to approve a request, but the initial request to us was over that threshold. And so we did debate whether we could handle this approval authority within our general manager's approval realm, or whether the board would like to see instances like this, where if the request meets that board approval threshold, yet we recommend a lower amount, would the board still like to see these projects and take action on them?
It would be my thought, you know, anxious to hear other people's thoughts. I would think it would still be a good idea to bring these forward, simply because the board could look at the circumstances, could look at the facts, and instead of staff's recommendation, recommend, you know, approve something closer to the actual request. So that would be my thought. Anyone? Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment, President Whitmore. I think it respects the community's request. Otherwise, I think as a community applicant, you would feel like maybe you just got shuttled under that, that barrier. I think it's appropriate for the board to review those requests.
Anybody have any other feedback on the 10%? I assume it's a guideline. It's not a hard and fast rule.
Correct.
It's just a guideline. And the board will have an opportunity to look at, as will staff, to look at specific situations and make different determinations and recommendations based on individual applications. So with that, Any other questions? Yes.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve staff recommendation.
All right, is there a second? Motion by Monger, second by Hazard. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Wonderful.
Our next board action item is also a project within Summit County brought to us by the High Country Conservation Center to advance irrigation efficiency across Summit County. High Country Conservation is bringing this application in close collaboration with the 19 Summit County water utilities. The primary goal of this project is to reduce outdoor water use in Summit County through the implementation of an outdoor efficiency program. And so there are 3 specific milestones within this project. The first being irrigation certification for local landscapers and government staff. So this is called a QUEL certification, a qualified water efficient landscaper. This trains our local staff and trains our West Slope to understand outdoor efficiency best practices and recommend them to both second homeowners in resort communities like Summit County and also permanent residents. The second piece of the outdoor irrigation efficiency program is to develop a rebate program that provides incentives both for irrigation audits and for efficient equipment upgrades. And the third piece is to design an education campaign that drives people to this program, drives water savings and builds a better outdoor conservation ethic in the community. And so the intent is to fund this initiative for the first 3 years with the understanding that the local water providers, once all of the infrastructure and programmatic pieces are in place, that the local water providers will take over this program at the end of 2024 and fund the rebates and ongoing programmatic needs of this going forward. So again, our contribution is just to promote this first 3 years, along with significant funding from the state water plan grant, funding from the communities of Breckenridge and Frisco and Summit County to get this endeavor started. And so for the project benefits, it promotes water efficiency and conservation through Summit County to reduce consumptive use through better management of outdoor landscapes and irrigation. It assists multiple jurisdictions to work towards this effort together. So again, Summit County has 19 water utilities within that county. It builds the local knowledge base on the West Slope. So previously, Summit County had been working with some Front Range entities, and the adoption wasn't successful working with some of the Front Range entities that I think didn't have a great understanding of some of the differences that our West Slope communities face. This building the local knowledge will also be a partnership with Eagle River Water and Sanitation. And then finally, in terms of letters of support, the Summit County Board of County Commissioners has also been very supportive of this process, and the towns of Breckenridge, Dillon, and Frisco have also been leading the effort to get this process started. The effort is fully funded beyond the contribution and request to our program. And so at the staff level, we do support this project. It advances our own district water conservation and efficiency goals. It advances some of our outreach and education goals, and also complements some of our communication strategies that you've heard a little bit about from our external affairs team, and we'll likely hear a bit of an update today on how we're working with municipalities and communities on both sides of the divide to bolster our conservation and efficiency efforts. So we are recommending full funding of a grant of $76,475 for this project.
Yes.
I just want to add, if you recall, a lot of our discussions yesterday about the pivot into looking at drought response within the state, and think about our stakeholder group on demand management, and what we heard very loud and clear from our ag producers were, look, we know we consume a majority of the water in the state, but if we're going to be asked to cut back and conserve on our water, we want our urban and suburban and homes to do the same. I think this is part of our commitment to spread that water conservation ethic throughout the water user sectors. And I think these kind of efforts are important just in terms of equity and in the water sector effort. And so about anybody else, I'm amazed that Summit County has 19 water providers within the county. It's amazing. We'll just say, since Taylor's not here, I suppose we could help a suburb of Denver actually give it some conservation. So.
Yes, Director Chandler.
Thank you. Amy, it's the High Country Conservation Center, an existing organization. I assume it is.
They are, yep, they are an existing nonprofit. I don't think I might have in the board packet, but when they were developed, but they are an existing organization, of course, both in the water space, but I think also in the energy space and in general, working to be wise stewards of natural resources.
Director McGinnis.
I think they're part of the county operation. Says here on their website, in 2006, Summit County government institutionalized the nonprofits recycling operations into state and government departments. Maybe it's recycling or something. I think it's helpful to always check the website and see what the background, because I like doing that because I want to make sure that, because I have some reluctance to maybe fund one of these groups that may be out advocating things counter to our overall mission. This was described to us what exactly, Andy, what our mission is. A lot of people misinterpret that, I think. And so that's why I looked at that. So maybe part of some county.
Yes, Director Munger.
So, so this is a 3-year, let me make sure I get the facts here. There's a 3-year program. And so are there goalposts and things, goals that we're gonna accomplish during that time? And then are we funding upfront money, or are we funding on a 3-year commitment level? And again, this all sounds good. I mean, this is what we want to have happen. And make sure that it doesn't just drop off the face of the earth when the 3 years is done too. So we're starting up a program to help move forward.
That's exactly right, Director Munger. So our 3-year contribution helps with the upfront costs of developing some of the landscaper trainings, like I mentioned, over the first 3 years to build up that local knowledge base. It contributes to the rebate program development. So all of the infrastructure and programmatic pieces are in place. It develops a structure for the rebate program administration, so that then at the end of 2024, and again, we did have conversations of, we want an end date for our CFP funds. We don't want to, end up in this realm of supporting this on an annual basis. And so the intention is that our funding will develop all of the programmatic pieces to have a functional outdoor irrigation efficiency program in place, so that then the local water providers can take on the responsibilities to fund the rebates for their customers going forward, and that all of the programmatic pieces are in place to do that.
Thank you.
So Amy, just to follow up on Director Munger's question, is the 76,000 divided by 3 years? I mean, is that over 3 years, or is it 76 times 3?
76 over the 3-year period.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm really supportive of this request. It looks like it should be replicable in other areas, and there are lots of pockets that have so many water providers. So this hopefully could provide a blueprint. I'm excited to see Eagle River Water and Sand involved, because they've been working on some of these efforts too. So hopefully when they're finished, they have a product that they could hand to another area. to try to implement.
We have already connected the Eagle River Watershed Council with High Country Conservation as they're thinking along the same lines. And then we are looking forward to connecting High Country Conservation Center with folks in Pitkin County and other areas around the state that have done these Quell certification trainings so that there is some good lessons learned and replicability across our district.
Yes.
One last question. I'll apologize to be
No
brief.
problem.
So are the 19 water providers on board here? I mean, we have Town of Breckenridge, Dillon and Frisco and Summit County on board here. But are the, I mean, it doesn't do any good to bring things in if nobody's going to support it at front line.
That is,
So-
it is my understanding that the 19 water providers are supportive and that the town of Breckenridge, Dillon and Frisco are the lion's share of some of the communities in Summit County, but the intention behind High Country Conservation Center is to be that convener to bring the water providers along.
Good, thank you.
Other questions or is there a motion?
Move to support staff recommendation.
Motion by Chandler Henry. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Beckley. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Our third action item
Madam
today
Chair,
is.
if I could just, would you mind giving page numbers when you start? 'Cause
Oh, sure.
I go back and forth and all of a sudden I can't figure out where.
232.
It's 232.
Great, thank you. And Andy, if you could help me with.
I
that,
will,
just
no
don't
problem.
have, that in front of me.
You got the old reliable paper.
Hey, I'm right. I'm a little old school and I'm a little worried. I'll
We
mess
say
up
the
my,
same thing.
PowerPoint setup.
Amy, you're not helping.
I'll use
Amy,
my,
just stop right there.
I see why you just keep going.
I'm gonna try not to make any more.
It might rub off over there. There is.
I've already joked how I feel
It
older and
is.
older each day.
Just don't mimic Andy.
So our next project is from the town of Oak Creek. It's for Sheriff Reservoir that is located in Rio Blanco County. Most of the water benefits accrue and flow towards Routt County. This is for the Sheriff Reservoir Dam Rehabilitation, final design and engineering. So Sheriff Reservoir Dam was constructed in 1954 and enlarged in 1965. It's a 47-foot high hazard embankment dam, again located 12 miles southwest of the town of Oak Creek within the Medicine Bow Routt National Forest. And I'll have a map on the next slide to better orient you. But the reservoir is currently restricted by the Colorado Division of Water Resources Dam Safety to 1 foot below the spillway at this point, which is a loss of about 37 acre feet of their capacity. It has been restricted further before, but due to some immediate improvements, the restriction is 1 foot below the spillway at this point. But it's due to dam safety issues, including an inadequate spillway capacity, some erosion issues within the foundation and sinkholes. So the key deliverable of this project is the final dam rehabilitation and design that can be approved by the Colorado Division of Water Resources Dam Safety Branch. The request is for $80,000. And the project is intended to be an equal split between the town of Oak Creek, Routt County, and the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, and all of those matching funds have been secured. So the project benefits is that this preserves 900 acre feet of west slope water storage that's critical to the town of Oak Creek's water supplies, particularly in drought years. It also provides late season irrigation releases to Trout Creek and Oak Creek and the Yampa River. The rehabilitation itself is intended to reduce the risk of dam failure, protect downstream property and lives, and also prevent more drastic storage restrictions for the reservoir. It has been supported by the Routt County Board of County Commissioners and also the Rio Blanco County Board of County Commissioners, where the water reservoir is located. and also the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. I mentioned that the funding is equally split between the town, Routt County, and Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. Again, this is for the final design and engineering. And so this is a request to consider additional contributions for construction, which will likely be a significant multi-million-dollar endeavor. But we are working with our partners, working with the consultants on this project to look at, again, how can we line up this project for bipartisan infrastructure money? How do we look at congressionally directed spending opportunities, which is an earmark process if that continues? And how do we work with them to better understand the town's capabilities to maintain this infrastructure so that, like Director Munger has mentioned, we don't see this back on the restriction list, and we have a long-term plan to maintain this infrastructure and an important storage opportunity on the west slope. So we are recommending the full funding of $80,000 to complete this final design and engineering in hopes that this does position this project within the 5-year term of infrastructure funding for the future construction needs that should be more so in the shovel-ready territory next year.
Thank you, Amy. Any questions for Amy in this project? Monger and then Curry. Vandenbrink, sorry. Vandenbrink and then Curry. I know, thank you. Vandenbrink.
Oh, sorry. I guess I know we at the roundtable discussed this in January of last year as well. And it got approved to do some of the design work on this thing and some PMFs. And I think we awarded them a grant of about $73,000. So it's a project needs to keep moving forward.
Director Curry.
I was just wondering, thank you. It was just wondering who the entity is that would handle the actual construction after the design is complete. Who manages the reservoir?
So the town of Oak Creek would be, is the intended project proponent for handling the design and engineering and then towards construction. I believe the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District is playing a bit of a role in helping that process along.
Director Monger.
Yeah, so, yeah, this is in the backwoods here, so in our backwoods, so, yeah, we're interested in having this happen, and I think it's great. This is kind of a down payment, as you just heard. Excuse me. We're trying to figure out how we can do it. I mean, the Upper Yampa is interested in, and if we could partner with that, and, maybe even have some augmentation water in Trout Creek. Trout Creek is short of water, and we could have some augmentation water if we could, and provide a plan of that. So, but it confuses things and it really makes a muddle out of things. So right now, we're just trying to interested in moving forward and and this is critical infrastructure for the town's water and the watering system. So for the municipal water. So, I think we're still in the process of making sure that conversations. Again, this is a step process. We all know how those things happen. You do the design and then you come back and ask for construction money and figure out what you can afford. And so this is what this thing will be. But I think it's a good project, and it's good water up in the base of the mountains. So I think we ought to try to figure out how we can preserve it and move on. How we continue moving on will be another discussion. So
is that a motion?
yes, please. I would move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Motion by Monger, second by Vandenbrink. And any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay.
Moving to our fourth action item for today. This is a project from the Somerset Domestic
Page
Waterworks.
235 of the packet.
Thank you. Somerset Domestic Waterworks District. It's the Somerset Water Treatment Revitalization Project. I just want to start this conversation by maybe talking about how we're trying to operate our program a little bit differently than just, you submit our application to us, we review it, and that's it. And so we've been working with the town of Somerset over the last year, along with multiple partners like the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the Department of Local Affairs, the Colorado Rural Water Users Association, the Western Slope Conservation Center, to really sit down hand in hand with the town of Somerset to figure out how to address some of their drinking water needs for this town. So just to back up, this town of Somerset is a small unincorporated town between Peonia and Redstone on Highway 133. It has significant ties to the coal mining industry and serves 62 taps. In 2021, the Somerset Domestic Water Works District gained ownership and operation of the Somerset drinking water plant that was previously operated and owned by the Oxbow Mining Company. And since that time, the town of Somerset has been really hitting the ground running of looking at how to address numerous challenges with taking over that water treatment plant and addressing some significant drinking water concerns for that town. So this project in particular has 3 components. It's fixing an aging and leaking raw water storage tank. It's installing what's called a GAC filter. That's an added layer of protection for disinfection byproducts and substances that are called TTHMs in their drinking water supply issues. And so this is an area of our district that's had some bromide issues that there are efforts to figure out exactly where that's coming from. But when bromide interacts with chlorination treatment, it creates essentially this TTHM, which is a known carcinogen and something that is created water enforcement issues for that town. And then the third piece is installing a SCADA computer system to automate the water treatment facility and catch treatment errors. And so right now, in a small town of the town of Somerset, it requires an operator to be available and on site 7 days a week, which I think we can all empathize how risky that is for the town to lose their operator due to burnout and not being able to ever leave. And so we are very supportive of looking for automation efforts for that community to allow them to both keep an operator and lower their operator costs. So in terms of the project benefits, we feel strongly that this supports our water quality guidelines and efforts to help under-resourced communities provide a safe and quality drinking water to their communities and their constituents. Again, I mentioned that we've been working with the town for over a year to develop when is the right opportunity for the River District to consider contributing to these efforts, and do we have the right slate of projects to support the town. We with them have received lengthy letters of support from the Colorado Rural Water Association, the Water Quality Control Division within the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the operator in responsible charge, the Gunnison County Utility Manager, and the Gunnison County Board of County Commissioners. We've worked closely and more intensely than we do in other projects to develop a funding package that might work for the town to, again, make sure that these projects get done. So our River District contribution would be 35% of these project costs. We worked with the town to develop 15% from their reserves and looking at creative opportunities to provide some loan structures for them. And then 50% from the Department of Local Affairs through their Energy Impact Assistance Fund. And so we worked very closely with DOLA on that opportunity. I actually just talked with them today to coincide. Our discussion with our board is happening today. The discussion with the Department of Local Affairs is happening next week. And we do know that having the River District support will be very influential in that decision. And so I think this is a great project of, again, how we are really working with our communities more so than other funding entities, and then also how these funds can be a critical catalyst to get work done. I also want to thank Raquel Flinker for her efforts. We've both spent a lot of time with this community in working with them to develop this project.
Amy, I assume our funding is contingent upon approval by DOLA.
It would be, because if DOLA does not end up approving, we would have to go back to the drawing board a bit and figure out what are the next strategies, because we did look and have conversations about the state revolving fund. We did determine, just because of the near-term critical nature of some of these fixes to their water treatment, the time it may take to go through the state revolving process might not have been the best fit, and the energy impact assistance fund was a better approach. I think we're hopeful that that works out, but if it doesn't, we would work with them.
Director Winter.
I mean, to me, this is a project that I applaud you guys for taking the extra steps, because they very much need the help, right? I mean, the rules and regulations of these, they have this thing, they live there, there's only 62 water taps. There's not a lot of options for them. Take it from a guy who lives where there's not a lot of people. So you guys, to me, this is one of the best projects and time that you could have spent, because they don't have a lot of choices. I'm very supportive of this. I think if they don't make it, come back and talk to us, because this is important.
Director Gray.
I'm supportive as well, but I do have a question. In the memo here, it says fixing an aging and leaking raw water tank. And because it is a small entity, how are they going to fix it? And is it a patch that, have they done enough analysis to know they're actually doing something that's going to last?
They are doing a coating on the inside of the storage tanks, where they have the bids from the vendor. They have gone through the inspection process, and then we have confirmed with CDPG that the intended contractor that they have lined up for the coating fix meets the Water Quality Control Division standards. So that's the approach they're taking, is a recoating of it.
Is it a surface tank or an underground?
It's a surface tank.
Yes.
Just one, I see that the CDPHE is a supporter of it, but have they finalized the construction documents so that this thing is ready to start going?
We have worked with CDPG on all of the permitting needs and all of the construction needs for the storage tank. They did receive a grant from CDPG's Small Communities program for some of the initial efforts of designing the GAC filter and getting that approval, and then also the approvals that they needed from CDPG to run the wastewater treatment plant following the agreement with Oxbow Mining Company.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I appreciate the work the staff has done. I don't know if I bet you Director Rober spent Somerset.
I've been there.
And it is kind of a sad state of affairs there. The families are not drinking the water because there's a restriction, plus there's a taste and odor problem, and they're afraid of the because it's under the CDPHE restrictions. Anything we could do to help, I know Gunnison County would be extremely grateful, because the rate, just like you said, Director Henry, the rate, there is no release there. I mean, no. Yeah, they don't have access. So, and they're looking at every option that they can. And
So would you like to move?
oh, I would move staff recommendation.
I'll second that.
Motion and second to approve staff recommendation, Curry and Winery. Any further discussion?
I just have a quick question. So I guess we're comfortable with the governance here and the rest, because I mean, it seems that they just took this over from Oxbow probably. And then we don't have any mention in here of the engineers. And so we've went through the engineers and having some help, some professional help being assisted in that. So
They do have engineering firms that have developed the, for each of the three systems, I believe it's 3 different engineering consultant firms for each of the components.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good enough. Thank you.
Yes, Director McGinnis.
Thanks. So I have a question about the future is, so the future is not very bright for Somerset. Are we then gonna be the sugar daddy, for lack of a better word? Are we picking up a water project now for eternity on this? People wanna live up there, we're gonna be having a water project.
Can I answer that? No, we're committed to one grant and one grant only. And we will help them find other funds if for some reason DOLA doesn't appear, but we're not adopting, and we're not gonna run the water system. That's not within our mission, not, I mean, we want to support the local community, but we are not ever going to take over anybody's domestic water system or manage it for them. I mean, I just want to be real clear about that. That's,
The reason for my question is the previous application in Oak Creek says this is a multi-million-dollar project. And this is the way we should anticipate, participant that I'm going. Starts out small, and what kind of lock-in are we having in the future? I hope we remember, because it'll eat all our money up because we keep getting bigger and bigger and they think we're the ones. Bank.
and I think it's important, and I think Amy does a really good job setting expectations with applicants, and no offense to Director Mager, but we're not going to fund a majority of or multiple tens of millions of dollars to Oak Creek's Reservoir rehab. And so we know that there are future phases of the project. There is no pre-decisional action by this board that commits us, staff or board otherwise, to continue to continue.
That's great, Amy. I think the setting expectations, because memories fall short on what they really. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Okay, any further discussion or questions? We have a motion on the table to approve staff recommendation. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay.
Andy, can you help me with the page number?
Absolutely. I do think we're fixing the problem as we go along. Granville Canal and Irrigation Company can be found on page 238.
Great.
And Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, we are. They're putting an agenda there, so it's great.
That's great.
A few
Perfect.
minutes. I was trying.
Yeah, it was very hard to navigate without that
Without the menu on the
menu on the
side.
side. Yeah.
Board action item number 5, so hang in there, we've got 3 more to talk about, is moving down into Delta County near Peonia for the Grandview Canal and Irrigation Company. This is a headgate and water optimization project. So Grandview Canal and Irrigation Company uses water for irrigation, stock, and domestic use, with the irrigation water primarily being used for hay and pasture land. This is a project that enhances a VOR-funded piping project that's being funded through the Salinity Control Program by installing a new headgate, an 8 acre-foot regulating pond, and SCADA throughout the system through their water measurement devices to allow for remote data collection on the pipeline and takeouts. So again, this is a funding request, and it's important to think about that this is attached to a larger BOR funded piping project, which is a $3.2 million investment just for the piping side, which is 33,000 linear feet of pipe. So the project goals here again are to enhance the functionality and efficiency of this piping project. The goals of overall are to improve water quality, improve erosion issues, and provide better water management for that system. And so this project does, in terms of looking at the project benefits, we're supportive of the conservation of irrigation water on the west slope. We're supportive of looking at how this may enhance a larger piping project within the Gunnison Basin and create a more complete and functional system to support our agricultural water users in the North Fork Gunnison Valley. It supports more accurate water releases through the implementation of the SCADA portions of this. The new headgate also supports healthy river objectives by mitigating issues where fish are often swept into the ditch. And so the intent is to potentially work with partners on a fish screen to eliminate that issue and improve the aquatic health alongside a more efficient water delivery system. This project has been heavily supported by the Delta County Commissioners the Crawford Water Conservancy District, the Delta Conservation District, and the Bureau of Reclamation, who is funding, again, this complementary piece of the project. I do want to leave a little bit of space and talk about the request for partial funding for this project of $135,000. So initially, the project partners had requested $233,000 for the project. Our partial funding represents about 25% of the total project cost. And again, here that's isolated to just the project enhancements for this. So it's important to note that this is also leveraging a significant contribution from the Bureau of Reclamation for the piping project itself. And so we do feel like, and we feel strongly that this is a project that aligns with our mission and has multiple benefits. But as we discuss often, we want to talk a little bit about how to maintain our equity targets. And so we've seen a lot of projects from Delta County within our program over this year and last year. We're supportive of some of our efforts in Delta County through the efforts of the Lower Gunnison RCPP. We've built some really great relationships in that area and are seeing a lot of successes in moving beyond the projects that were sparked from the Lower Gunnison RCPP, including both funding years of 2021 and 2022. This project, and one we'll discuss next, would be the 7th and 8th projects in Delta County out of 35 total projects up for funding, and fully funding the request would move Delta County's contribution to almost a quarter of our CFP funding to date. And so we did have significant conversations at the staff level of how do we maintain our equity targets, given that, you know, we want to support some of those objectives on a 5-year basis, but even in years 1 and 2, we have to start being mindful of those conversations and have to be mindful of some of those commitments within our program. So again, thinking about the partial funding, we did want to acknowledge all of the additional federal funding and the additional support from the Grandview Canal and Irrigation Company, and try to strike a balance of being a meaningful participant in this project while still keeping in mind our equity targets within Delta County and looking at a lot of other projects and a lot of other needs in that county that are looking for support into the future. So maybe I'll pause there and answer any questions.
Amy, what other funding sources have they identified for then the balance of 100 and
Right.
some?
So we have talked with them about, are there opportunities to look through the CWCB loan program at the state or some of the grant programs within the state, which I think we are sensitive to the time it takes to go through those processes. I think we're willing to work with them on lending our support to look at whether the Basin Roundtable is an option, to look at whether the Water Plan Grant Program, which has an upcoming deadline of July 1st, is an option to close that funding gap. And I think in particular for Grandview, has all of the permitting and groundwork to be shovel ready. And so it really is that last fundraising need to get this project.
And again, our funding would be contingent on them getting the rest of it.
Right, I think they will need to fill that funding gap to complete all of the components of these enhancements.
Other questions for Amy? Yes, Director McGinnis.
I think that's excellent. Because what I picked up when I looked at these is we're always either the top request or the second highest request, which suggests they think that it's high with us. So I'm glad you analyze it. The other projects, so doing that.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you. From the Gunnison Basin Roundtable perspective, it seems to us that Delta County has its act together on projects, and that's why we see so many. If other folks in the Gunnison Basin don't come forward for Water Supply Reserve Fund dollars, you know, it's because especially the guys up on the Grand Mesa they are ready. They're more shovel ready. They're moving stuff forward. They have infrastructure needs. And I kind of view this as an example of an entity that got it self-organized. And I guess maybe it could tip the scales on the geographical distribution, but on the other hand, if it's feasible and viable and they're ready to go and it fits our mission, I gotta hand it to the guys in Delta County.
I would like to thank Director Curry for that observation, because I think these people have been ahead of their time. And I think that every district, thinking back to the presentation DK made in February, it's kind of been poster child in some ways. And I think this particular company is a little disappointing. They did make a call to me. They kind of feel like it's, I guess it's hard, and it has to come sooner or later, I guess, but they feel a little like the kid that's been given everything he wanted, and all of a sudden told no. And they're, this is the final phase of the project. And they would like to be able to say they're done. And so I understand what staff recommendation is. And we're willing to live with it, but I can support my constituents here, and their request was for more to try and get the project done. So that's the board decides that. Maybe it is a case where you chalk one up and say, this is what we did. We got it done. Because it's a hard decision. I thought I better say something. I did receive a phone call.
So if we give what we're talking about here, does that mean the project doesn't get done?
Not necessarily. I think they have plans on how to do that, but it's going to require more work.
Easier.
Yes, Director. Winter.
Director Curry is somewhat right, because I remember when we used to have our other project supply thing, there were professional grant writers that stood at the door. And they first ones in got the money, and the projects that people that, to a certain extent, that really somewhat needed them, the paperwork was overwhelming and daunting, and they looked at you like, really? But these other people were so fast on the trigger. And I don't want to get, I'm not saying this is one of those. In Delta County, I would agree with somewhat, because over the years, Delta County's got a huge chunk of money. And we will never get that in Hinsdale County, so we don't even have that much water. But what the point being is, what I don't want to do with any project, I don't care whether it's what proponent it is, who's helping, whether it's Trout Unlimited, it doesn't matter who those people are. Those guys are fast on the type. I couldn't type a sentence on this in 20 minutes. So I'm out. But other people that are so fast on the trigger that will be at our doorstep with this money is a lot what again is referring to is keep coming back. That's, I want to be cognizant of that over a long term. And I think I'm trying to stand you on. No offense to your folks, I get it. I totally understand that, but you got it. At some place, here's the line. And I'm going back to the people in Somerset, right? They don't have a whole lot of options. Those folks don't. I mean, there's a significant difference in where choices in life. And so it's a big, to me, it's a significant difference. I understand the political pieces, but so I'm comfortable in where this is at.
Andy.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this is a really hard one. If you go back to our small grant program, Delta County was at the top of the list for a decade. And some of that is that they have a really great and have historically, the Soil Conservation Service there, the Conservation Services there, have worked really well and hard to make sure that happens. We also help increase the capacity and awareness by having the Lower Gunnison project there, bringing in significant federal and state funding and dedicating huge staff resource time to get that accomplished. I think we have to be wary that we haven't provided that same level of funding and service to the other areas in the district, and we need to make sure we do. And it's not an anti-Delta County, I want everybody else to look like Delta County in terms of piping and efficiency and conservation. And we've got a lot of work to do throughout our large 15 county area. So, Amy and I just want you to know, Amy is an incredibly thoughtful person, and the way she approached this and really talked through with staff and myself. I fully support the staff recommendation on this because of all of those factors. And it is not a out of any kind of disregard. We have great admiration for this canal irrigation company. We have great admiration for everything Delta County has done, and we just need to help everybody else. And so that's kind of where we're coming from. These guys are so well positioned because of a lot of the work we did with them, and so I don't want to discourage them, but we also have to balance.
Yes, Director.
I would move staff recommendation.
Motion by Monger for staff recommendation. Is there a second? Second from Hazard. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. All right.
Action item number 6, also in Delta County, the Crawford Clipper Ditch Company has requested funding for additional piping of 4,900 linear feet, and also the creation of a 6 acre-foot irrigation control pond to expand their sediment basin and improve water quality in an area of flat elevation on their ditch. So just to back up, Crawford Clipper Ditch Company supplies about 3,500 acres of primarily hay and pasture land with irrigation water. They have several decreed water rights of about 164 CFS appropriated between 1884 and 1930. Again, this component is complementary to again other piping projects funded by the Salinity Control Program, but does include a portion of piping an existing earthen ditch, and then again to create the irrigation control pond to better manage the timing of that water. It also does include SCADA water monitoring management, a SCADA system to be installed at the head gates and used to automate the flow through gate actuators in real time. So the project goals for this is also to improve water quality, improve erosion issues, and create better water management within their system. There is a similar funding structure for this project in that they are complementary to VOR funded projects within their system. They have funding from the NRCS water management entity realm. And looking at the project benefits, again, this promotes better use of our irrigation water on the west slope. It promotes making the systems more efficient and allowing through the piping project additional pressure so that irrigators have the option to think about whether transitioning to more efficient watering systems makes sense for their system. It does reduce erosion issues and improves water quality through removing salt and selenium that eventually ends up in our Colorado River system, and also supports more accurate water releases, more accurate management through the SCADA installation. Similar partners and support from our previous project, again, a project heavily supported by the Delta County Board of County Commissioners, the Delta Conservation District, Bureau Reclamation, Crawford Water Conservancy District, and the town of Crawford. We are again recommending a partial funding request for exactly what we just discussed in terms of equity issues with Delta County. So again, really thinking hard and thoughtfully about how do we provide a meaningful contribution to this project, acknowledge the support and dollars that are coming from the Crawford Clipper Ditch Company, both cash and in kind. This contribution is about 15% of the total project cost. And again, looking at the percentages, we try to shy away as much as we can beyond some of the discussion of the municipal water project front of identifying hard percentages of what that partial funding amount means and looking at the total project costs and what those components are. But we are recommending a funding request of $150,000. They initially requested $250,000. Again, acknowledges that we see and support the multiple benefits of this project and how it aligns with our River District mission and what we hope to do with this funding, but also acknowledges our efforts to maintain our equity targets, maintain space to consider other projects from Delta County, and look at those efforts early on in our 5-year funding cycle. So I'll pause there for questions.
Before we take this up further, I need to disclose that this ditch company is a client of mine. I do some legal work for them. I have had no involvement at all with this project or this application. And unless our general counsel feels differently, I think I can act on this without bias. Any questions for Amy? Director McGinnis.
Yeah, so we all know what a cash contribution is, pretty easy to define. Do we ask them what their in-kind, do we get details on their in-kind contribution?
We have not asked for specific details. We are looking at how to tweak our efforts going forward, but I think these systems provide a significant amount of project management support. They often lend equipment to complete these projects. Director Rover, you may have more to offer on the in-kind piece of this, but
I think it's just a good idea. In my situation, we got a Chamber of Commerce that always throws their part of it in. Their burden sharing is in kind, which means essentially they mean nothing. So I just like on all our projects, when we have in kind, have them itemized for us. I'd be interested in that.
we are supportive that the Crawford Clipper Ditch Company, in additional to in-kind support, is bringing $75,000 in hard cash to this project. And that is important to us as we look at these funding requests and what we've said in our guidelines is that in-kind support is meaningful and important to consider, but really looking for how these projects, I think particularly for these types of construction projects, are bringing some cash to the table. And I think it does play into just the conversation throughout here of how do we maintain these systems into the future. So that's a great point, and I'll flag that.
And again, once again, here we're number 2 out of the 4 or 5, I guess out of the 5 co-funders. So
Yes, Director Kirk.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. So when we look at our board packet in the table of the funding partners and it says Colorado, so the 250,000 was what was requested, but you're recommending 150, right? And then you probably said it and I missed it. I do apologize. Where would they get the other 100? Do you
So
think?
they are still in conversations with the CWCB about both loan options
Okay.
and the roundtable
Thank you.
process. And so I think there are still efforts and conversations to be had as to how those two opportunities can play into this project.
Yes, Director Munger.
I appreciate us having all these conversations that we're having. And again, I think if they can't make it work, they can come back to us at a later point in time and say, hey, can you reconsider? We can't find the money somewhere else, or we can't pencil it out. So I'm fine with that. And I think we need to, and back to Director McGinnis's comment, I'm not sure. We're kind of new at this game, but I thought DOLA and the rest, they have some rates for in-kind and for some, I don't know, if some accountability for their in-kind. And we ought to have that too. We're expecting all of our participants to act in the best character, and to do that. So I think those are all good questions.
Okay, and is there a motion?
I'd move staff recommendation.
Motion by Monger, second by Chandler Henry. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay.
Our last project to discuss is a application from our Colorado River District Enterprise for the 2022 Yampa River Flow Pilot Project. And just to remind the board, we discussed an approval for these flows last year. And while the requested amount is less than $50,000, we've opted on the precedent and good practice that if we're looking at opportunities for our enterprise to use funds from the community funding partnership, it's good government and transparent to bring those action items to the board for approval. And so this supports the continuation of the 2021 Yampa River Flow Pilot Project to make available 1,500 acre feet of releases out of Elkhead Reservoir to benefit both consumptive and in-channel uses during low flow periods on the Yampa River. The releases will be placed to beneficial use from the outlet of Elkhead Reservoir and continuing downstream to the Yampa River near Maybell. And so the releases will benefit in-channel uses for that initial 66-mile reach of the main stem of the Yampa, and then will continue to benefit in-channel uses beyond that point, but will also be made available for diversion for downstream consumptive water uses. And so you may remember that for the 2021 releases, the River District's Community Funding Partnership did support the full 1,500 acre feet at a $50,000 contribution. And so we have had conversations with the local community to look at how can we use the support of the Yampa River Fund, which is a local funding source, to split these costs at a 50-50 ratio. And so we have also applied to the Yampa River Fund, which we expect to hear a decision on May 16th, but we've had productive conversations with that review panel to split the costs for this year's endeavor, again, at a 50-50 cost ratio. Again, looking at the project benefits of these releases, it supports the collaborative efforts that are going on in the Yampa River Basin as they address a system of new calls for that basin in our district. It enhances the water security for both our historical water users in that basin and also supports the recreational economy and environmental needs for the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program that supports the recovery of the 4 listed fish under the Endangered Species Act. The district will have significant involvement in the timing and coordination of those releases, working in close conjunction with our water users and the Division of Water Resources to gain the most significant benefit of these releases from both a consumptive water use perspective and the non-consumptive recreation and environmental benefits. We do have strong support from the irrigators in the lower Yampa River, support from Moffat County and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to continue this endeavor and also continue our efforts to model and determine the impact of these releases and better assist that basin in a little bit of a transitionary period that they're facing.
Thank you, Amy. And I do appreciate you bringing this one to the board, notwithstanding its funding level. I totally agree with your comments on that. Any discussion on this, or questions for Amy or a motion? Yes. Director Vandenberg.
I just have a question. I understand the purpose of this is to help alleviate administration partially within the Yampa River system. By doing this, would this also have significant benefits as a basin that's now considered over appropriated to Great Northern Water Conservancy District for them to continue moving forward with the projects that they need to find their solid firmness? Does this help buy them some time without shutting people off?
Unfortunately, once the basin is declared over appropriated, any its impacts are on groundwater pumpers. So this in-channel release made available for consumptive users downstream does not alleviate or the need from the state regulatory perspective for those new groundwater pumpers or wells that are being used for non-permitted purposes to go out and get an augmentation source and plan approval. So unfortunately, it does not help that situation because the state has moved forward with that determination.
Yep, I knew that too. I just forgot about it.
Yeah, no, it's a
Thanks for the refresher.
good
Yeah.
question. I wish it would.
You and me both. Okay,
Yes.
And I just want to say, it appears that it's benefiting the in-channel use and then a few irrigators in the lower upper, but what it does do is, because we've had this call on the river, which is so far, it's the very last major diversion on the Amber River before it enters Dinosaur National Monument. But when you prevent a call, you prevent, or you assist and you help all of those tributary users that don't have any storage anyway. And, you could say, well, the major diverters on the Amber River are the oldest ones. They're not going to get called out. And that's true. Hardly any of that call affects the main stem, but it does affect all of our tributaries. So we're looking at this as a countywide benefit, not just as a little section of river that benefits a few diverters. And we have the matching funds from the Amber River Fund, which have in their operating charter that the money's to benefit all uses. And so I really thank you for last year, because there's not any impetus to do something like this without the river district stepping in. We're going to try this. We're going to pilot it. This year, we're going to the Amber River Fund to get half of it. Andy and I have agreed, this doesn't need to be an every year request, although I will say there's no higher and better use for this money to benefiting as big a broad a base of benefit as this is, including the in-channel uses. So I'm not going to promise we'll not be back depending on what happens in the future, but this really is groundbreaking. A groundbreaking thing to prove and to help out the in-channel use. We're working on getting some more of that combination in-channel use and irrigator.
So is that a motion?
That's a motion.
All right, motion to approve staff recommendation.
Yes.
Sir.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Gray, second by Vandenbrink.
I just have one
Yes.
quick comment too. So we would be asked to release water. And this is just props up our enterprise fund kind of concept. So, the water should pay for itself somehow. And so the 7A is going to help pay for that. Amber River Fund's going to help pay for that. So, and we get money into the enterprise fund to do enterprise things. So I think this is a totally great, at the same point in time, we turn around and I think we release water out of Rudai, and so I think it's great that we get to pay ourselves a little bit of money for the enterprise concept of it. So.
Well, and I want to just say, the last year through our efforts and really I want to just again commend Aaron Light and her team up in Division 6. Oftentimes we only hear the bad things about our state administrators, water administrators. They really cooperated with our team to help time that water and keep the call off for a significant part of the year. And that's the kind of cooperation that we're going to need moving forward to solve a lot of these problems. And we're going to need a lot of creativity. And I just want to say that there are times where our district is a thorn in the side of people who like rules, because we often operate and push those rules outside to try to come up with creative solutions. We're going to keep doing that because the times we're in call for that creativity. This has been one of those opportunities to really find a way to help the community. And I think this is a really fun one to do and to help the community and see our district actually making a direct impact materially to our water users. So I just think this is the kind of thing we should be doing.
Yes.
I'm sorry for one more follow-up question here, but we just kind of, isn't there an end or a minimum flow recommendation that the recovery program has with water that's stored in Elkhead Reservoir that could be released as well?
Yeah, and they are releasing. We're piggybacking
This is-
their releases. The problem is that water gets shepherded past every head gate, including the calling
Okay.
structure. So the call stays on the river and that
Understand.
water goes downstream to help keep in that critical reach.
Okay.
And so that's why it's so critical that we're able to have.
All right, if there's no further comment or discussion, all those in favor of the motion, aye.
I,
All those opposed, nay. Great. Thank you very much, Amy. Really, really excellent job, excellent presentations. We are actually running a few minutes ahead of schedule, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. Yes.
I did have one sort of overall question
Great.
on this, and I really appreciate your tables at the end of the funding request showing where the money has gone, and then the pie charts showing the distribution and that. My question is, what money do we have remaining in the fund? And what happens to that money? Is it in like a money market fund to earn interest, or is it just sort of commingled with district funds?
It's a Netflix stuff.
Okay.
That's a great question, Director Shanley Henry. So we started this year with about 6.2 million, which accounts for our annual contribution of 4.2 million, and then we do roll over any unspent funds. And so we will continue to build that funding base with those contributions. And so with the funding recommendations to date, we're at about 1.7 million. So subtracting that from 6.2, which is tough math, is about 4 point, what is that?
4.5.
4.5 left for the remaining year. And again, we're not, we don't look at our funding program that we need to spend our balance down to zero every year. And we're looking at how do we build the balance up so that we can make meaningful contributions for larger projects. In terms of how the money is managed within the district, I believe the board has approved a separate fund specific to the community funding partnership. And we have had just very preliminary discussions of how do we, as we build a funding base, look at additional gains from an interest perspective to grow that fund. But Andy, you may want to.
Yeah, all of our investments are governed by state law in terms of what investments. Unfortunately, no Bitcoin, no GameStop, no Netflix, but we are excited. Others are not. We're excited to see interest rates rising because we might actually get some money back from all of our investments, because we are in conservative investments on behalf of the River District. And we have an investment committee. Doug is chair of that. We really do try to be cautious with public money, but we keep those reserves available, and we'll do that. So far, the CFP has not been put into those longer term investments. We intend to put some of that in there. We're just looking at the right vehicles right now, and so Ian and Doug and others are looking at that. I want to stress what Amy touched on is that, we have the 4.2 million a year commitment. And then as the other part of that, if you recall during the budgeting cycle, is that when we have excess funds in the general fund every year, we're moving those over as additional contributions to the CFP. I am a big fan of, and I try to encourage staff to think about saving, stockpiling money, not because we want to hoard it, but because we want to be able to fund the big projects when they come along that are of major importance to our water users. So I think Amy is doing a great job with that, and we don't want to spend money like drunken sailors. So.
That's great. And I would love it if you could add maybe that fund balance as we're starting to move through these, so we can see the big picture of what's come in and what's available, and the sources, whether it's general fund rollover or the 4.2.
And then we do have one last item that,
okay.
and I'm sorry.
Yeah, Madam Chair, we can either take a break and pick this up, or we can try and move quickly through conversations.
Director Gray had a question.
Can we take a 5-minute break? And then we'll come back and finish up questions, because these are all good questions, and so 5-minute break.
How many applications have we had this quarter at this time that didn't make the cut? You didn't bring to us because you didn't meet the criteria. Were there any that you just had to respond back and go, sorry, thanks for your application, but given the criteria?
No,
We have not had,
Just for everybody else, if you didn't hear that, the question is, how many applications have there been that have not been recommended for funding?
we have not had any applications that met the board thresholds that we have not recommended to bring to the board. We are working through first denial of the projects that would fall within our general manager's authority. That I'm happy to talk more about, but it relates to an on-farm efficiency project, which we know are something we're really thinking strategically as to what is the role of our community funding partnership in those types of projects. So we are working through, I would say, our first formal denial of a project.
I think that was in.
It was actually in
No.
Garfield County.
Okay.
It's in Garfield. If I can, I mean, part of what happens here, Tom, is that we require a pre-application consultation. And most of those are not just one-offs. They're an ongoing discussion with Amy and our technical team. And so the applications that actually get submitted are ones that have been pre-vetted and coached
And look like they'll make it.
and look like they'll make it, right? Whereas like, I think there are a number that never get formally submitted that get diverted off somewhere else. And that's exactly why we require the pre-application.
That's a
So,
great system.
yeah, yeah.
I like that.
yeah. So the Garfield County one is one that you may be hearing on appeal from our denial. And I say our, I'm gonna blame everybody else in this, my denial of funding. And that's okay. I want you to be able to hear it and understand the criteria that we're implementing and utilizing in those decisions so that you know, so that we know that you think we're on the right track or not. But there are some tricky ones that come in. So Amy does a great job of helping direct non-relevant applicants.
I appreciate that. And I had a constituent, maybe I thought that they inquired, and it was a non-farm efficiency and you guys kind of talked about it. It didn't really meet the threshold. So that's a good buffer between representatives.
Yeah.
If I can go in on Tom, if I may, please. Sure. In Moffett and Rio Blanco County, it's hard for us to get assistance from like NRCS because we only have one NRCF as agent that covers both of our counties. So you're only looking at just a handful of projects actually getting done. And then now this is also junior staff, so they're still learning into the task. And then retaining somebody that gets senior, that's hard. So we have a lot of folks, including our district, looking for external assistance on what we can do to maximize our agricultural productivity, and to help fund these things, but we're running into roadblocks to move these forward. So we've got ranchers that want to do, or irrigators that want to do projects. They just simply can't get the technical expertise on what to do for the next step. And as our example, I approached NRCS earlier this year. And just to give you an example, they said 2 years, and then maybe we'll see if we can take your number.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very real.
There are literally thousands of NRCS staffing positions that are open and not person, there's no person in those positions. And it's a real serious problem west-wide. You know, we interact a lot with the Family Farm Alliance and others, and it is a huge problem. And so you're not alone, unfortunately, in that frustration. This kind of ties into some information that we need to touch on in terms of the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the funding available, and how we want to do some assistance on planning and technical work, and Amy will open that up here. But I think it's a problem. You know, I think, you know, you have the interesting thing is, at least from the outside, Al, you have really effective what I still call soil conservation districts.
Yes.
And great leadership there. And I wonder if we can help with Ally actually lobby to get more help from the NRCS. That might be something that we could help, not necessarily through the CFP, but through our own.
Extending
political
words of
advocacy.
encouragement. And if I need to do whatever I can, just let me know.
Okay,
Thank you.
great discussion and great presentation. And so if there aren't any other questions at the moment about the community funding program, we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for letting me stay up here. I think I'm starting to rival Peter to this meeting. But I have Rick Helflinker joining me because we do want to have, and I will try and be speedy, a conversation about bipartisan infrastructure law opportunities and how we're looking at strategic ways that we can provide value in capturing some of those funds within our district. And so quickly, we have developed a cross-discipline team within our River District staff to look at bipartisan infrastructure law opportunities from multiple angles. And so to note is that it's an interdisciplinary team that brings together our communication staff, our advocacy team, our technical team, and myself from the funding realm to really look at the bipartisan infrastructure law opportunity from all sides. And so we've been focusing our efforts in 3 areas over the last few months. The first being partner communication. We have done a lot of relationship building conversations with state and federal entities to understand what programs, where are these dollars going to go, where are there matching opportunities, where can we work together, working with our NGO partners on what are their priorities. The second bucket of understanding local priorities, we've been trying to sit down with our water users to better understand what are their priority water projects, where are they in the planning and design process, so that we can help play a matchmaker role if there's a complicated web of where all of this money will flow. And so if we can better understand the priorities of our local water users, that will help us. And then lastly, our funding and technical support has been what we'll talk more about today, of how do we use our community funding partnerships strategically, and how do we use the resources that our tech team provides to projects over the next 5 years and beyond to capture federal funds. And so immediate areas of support, I mentioned communication. We have a lot of platforms that exist within the River District that we're going to look at as to how do we communicate funding opportunities to our water users. How do we use our platform as an organization to host webinars with funders that can explain, here's how you go through the process. Advocacy is a big piece of this, working closely with Zane, not only to advocate potentially for certain projects, but also to advocate for changes to funding programs that make them more applicable to what we have in Western Colorado. And then the piece we want to spend a few minutes to get input on is, again, the funding and technical support that we can provide at the River District. And so what we've heard time and time again, and sorry about the block there, from conversations with our federal funding entities is that early stage planning is really key in capturing and being competitive for these funds. And that relates to both preliminary design, it relates to feasibility level cost estimates. So the farther along these projects can get to more of a concept of 30% design, the more competitive they're going to be in programs like the Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart Opportunities, where we know $400 million is going to go to. Programs like the Bureau of Reclamation's Aging Infrastructure Account, which has a significant amount of money, I think it's 3.2 billion over the 5 years. Another way to look at this is a chart that we've been working on and Raquel has developed of, there are a lot of steps to get to a shovel-ready project, and especially a lot of steps when you're going through the federal arena of having the environmental permitting considerations and all of the design work that has to meet certain specifications. And so I think this is, a slide we've been working on of just articulating the front end work that it takes to get to a project that's actually moving dirt. And so one of the pieces that we want to talk to this board about is when we look at our community funding partnership, we do have some capacity to support some of the earlier stage design and feasibility efforts that get projects to that 30 to 60% design and are then competitive for these federal opportunities. And so while we could look at those through our community funding partnership on a rolling basis, there's always that opportunity. One of the strategies that we've been looking at is to isolate and market a specific funding opportunity within the community funding partnership that's specific to some of these design, feasibility, and engineering costs, specifically for projects that have a clear pathway to federal funding, so that they are then competitive for the larger federal dollars for the construction side of these projects. And so when we look at the different funding opportunities, I think we see gaps in who is willing to fund some of these early stage efforts in projects that we know are critical to moving these projects forward. We think time is of the essence in getting these projects ready to apply. Again, the Bureau of Reclamation has a 5-year spending plan where our understanding is that there will be more or less equal amounts for these programs over the 5 years. Some of our other federal partners are understanding from the NRCS is it's more of a rolling basis of a little bit of a first come, first serve. They're making funding decisions on a monthly basis. And so when we think of where our community funding partnership provides a lot of value is that we've developed a structure that can be nimble, that can be flexible. And so we're looking at ways to best support our water users in the context of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so I think the input that we wanted to get from the board is the discussion on our thought process of opening up a special funding round within the community funding partnership with pretty clear sideboards of these are the types of projects we want to see that we're willing to potentially support some of the early stage design, engineering, and planning efforts, so that then the next step is that these projects probably next year or during this 5-year period are applying for programs like the Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart Opportunities. And so we're early on in our thinking, but given that we had a board meeting and given that timelines are moving pretty quickly, we wanted to bring that for input and discussion for the board, but I want to open it up for Kel if there's any other pieces of the setup.
I would just add that on this slide, boxes 1 and 2, even though they're not being proposed for a CFP funding round, we support projects on those 2 pieces already. We communicate with them on what their project priorities are and how we can help them. So we already provide some support in the beginning.
I'm just going to say, I am really, really glad that our staff has taken the initiative to wade through the several thousand pages of this legislation and try and figure it out, because it's a morass for most people, and certainly most most of our constituents are not going to have the capability to do that. I also think your proposal makes a lot of sense. You are absolutely correct. Sometimes the design and feasibility money is the hardest to come up with. And yet, I know that even in Ray County, there are a lot of people looking at this infrastructure bill thinking it's going to be useful, but not knowing how to jump into it. So I think this is great. I love the idea of putting some of our community funding money into helping entities access the federal money that's available. Yeah, Director McGinnis.
So I really like the concept and everything. I'm just wondering, do we have the capacity personnel wise? I mean, I'm assuming you're all pretty busy before you take on this. And I guess I wasn't paying attention to our member, but I didn't realize we had the cap on personnel. So, we all get really excited about this. You put something out like that, I think there's big need for it. I think a lot of people jump on board and then all of a sudden they'll depend on us to do what they otherwise would do. I just want to make sure that what's our priority for the personnel we have, and do we have the capacity to shift you from whatever you're doing right now to this? So I guess that's more.
Well, and I appreciate that, Director McGinnis. I would say, working closely with this team and developing this recommendation, a couple of things just to be clear, we're not suggesting that our technical staff is going to do the technical design. We're going to help our applicants hire the right people to do that, contractors. And so we're not looking at that, but what we are looking at is using our funds to get them through that initial stage, or to help them get through that initial stage so that they're well positioned for the infrastructure funds, for the federal funds.
So Madam, what I hear is, okay, here's funding, but we're not going to allocate, we're not sending people over to go through your 1,000 pages of regulations.
Right.
Some money-
Well, we have gone through and I think our team actually understands the regulations. I would say this, as well as anybody else can, right? Because it's morass is the kind word for what that project is, for that legislation is kicked off. But this is, our perspective is that if we don't take the leadership on this and help by offering this round of funding, Western Colorado is going to see this funding get sent over to a couple other states that are much more sophisticated and have already developed these kind of programs. I'm not picking on them, just again, I would say the Delta County of the West is probably Utah and California, those two. Those guys, they are extremely sophisticated and able to leverage and move for this funding. We just want our constituents to be able to compete for it.
Mm-hmm.
Our team has waded through those regulations, seems to have a pathways to help people get success. We help them say, here's an opportunity to identify it. You're only at a conceptual level. We need to get you at 30% and design. Here are some firms that can help you. We're going to have a round of grants aimed directly at this. So it's even within our own program. We've been very concerned about paying for design, not knowing if a project is going to be built.
So that's the matchmaking concept.
Yeah, yeah, that's really what we're trying to do. And yes, let me say this, our staff is very busy. This is going to add to their workload. It is something we need to do. That's my perspective on it.
Yes, Director Winter.
No, I think from being on both sides of that piece, it is very hard, and I think Director and Frank brought it up. NRCS, generally, people went to them a lot to help with these programs and designs and projects. It's difficult to get through the hoops and processes. I go back to that professional grant writing fast on it. If you guys can help fund some of the initial, say here, go hire this firm, this is their specialty. I'm all for that because it would position them to where they can leverage it out, that they will they'll get way further in the realm of things. And I fully support what, it's an uphill, that's a lot of work, so. You pay overtime?
These are, by and large, our employees are professionally exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act. Overtime.
You just keep on to that page.
Okay.
You just keep on that page.
Okay, so we have heard, pretty favorable comments. I think Director McInnes has asked about whether, staff has time capacity, whether we have the resources to do this. Andy seems to indicate that that's been discussed internally. Do we have any other kinds of comments, negative comments? Anybody who thinks it's a bad idea?
Not a bad idea. I think I commend you for stepping forward in this capacity, and I'm someone that's in the middle of some of that right now. And right now, frankly, we're working with the departments of no, because every time you come forward, it's no. Because we lack the capability to fully come out and understand this very complex issue, and trying to work with the federal government is trying to push a wet noodle. You never know which way it's going to go. So I also see to where what you have, yeah, you may kind of say you're strapping yourself, but you're also taking a risk that one or two real key projects is could create considerable revenue for this organization as well, to potentially bring on additional resources if you need to help move this forward. So yeah, it's an extenuating effort right now, but yet there can be considerable rewards later on. It's a matter of taking the step forward and the risk and doing it. So that's where I see you've got staff here, they're saying, we're going to do this, wherever we can. So, and I'm sure I'll be visiting with you.
Yes, I'm sure. Yes,
Just really
Director
quickly,
Curry.
are we, and this is a question about the role of the River District, are we serving as a resource, or are we going out and soliciting or talking to entities and suggesting that they engage on this? But how do you see your role?
And by entities, or do you mean our
Project
various
proponents.
Project proponents. I think it's a little bit of both. I think, we're, as much as we can, doing sit downs with our water users to better understand. I think we'll look at how do we, I think one of the ideas with this is the incentivization and marketing that we can do, that this is an opportunity for projects. And so while, we could consider on a rolling basis these design and engineering and feasibility costs, by isolating the specific round, it allows us
But do they come to
to
you,
broadcast that.
or are we going to them?
We are out. We have several policies approved by the board that guide us in terms of efforts to help our water users. We often find ourselves, I can just identify, the Uncompahgre Valley water users. They've got some tremendous opportunities for efficiency and conservation within their system. We are pushing there because we think that it will end up benefiting all of the water users in the region if they improve their system. And we are not just sitting back and soliciting, we are actively engaging where we see that it meets this district's goals and benefits the greater community. So, but just by way of.
Director Monk.
So I think this is a great conversation, and I think I'm kind of missing part of here of the conversation. I mean, we still need to make sure we have our goals and objectives included. And they're in, you guys bring them up every time we have the, but again, so are we talking about aging infrastructure? Are we talking about better use of water and water smart? Are we talking about, and increased usage of water even? So, so there's a fine line about, what all we do there. So I think, again, I've always tried to been of the thought, you try to take care of what you got first and before you start going out and doing more, but make what you have work better and the rest. And so I don't know. I don't know where that fine line is, but again, as if we have, we can't be the catch-all for everybody either. And again, I complain to myself, I'm not a visionary. I've never been a visionary. I'm an operational person and I get things done, but I don't vision that where the Delta thing, I mean, good for them, man. I wish I'd had enough brains to figure that out myself at some point in time, but that's not my bailiwick. So, but anyhow, I think whatever we can do to help these things in, because it is really frustrating to do a project even. I mean, I did a head gate, $200,000 head gate, and yeah, it's a heck of a process to do, even if I have technical skills, some, but but it's however we can help get money on the ground. But we need to make sure we're working toward those objectives that we better use of water, wiser use of water, and saving water and all those things that we do for the whole. And we need to keep that in mind.
And I agree at both the board policy level, it provides great guidance, but so does the framework that's been approved by this board for the CFP. All of that work will be consistent with those guidelines.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I feel like between this effort and the community funding process, projects, we have the opportunity to really change the face of the River District in the future. I was thinking about that this morning as the projects were going through. These are things that might not have happened. And so you look at before 7A and maybe 10 years into the future, what a difference these efforts plus bringing in some of this federal money. It could be the difference between running dry on some of our ag lands and our municipalities and being in a much healthier water, better environmental flows and ag water, municipal water. So I think the potential is huge, and I think it's a great place for the River District to be positioned.
Agree. Anyone else have comments? Amy, does this give you enough direction?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent presentations. Good work. And now we move to external affairs. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll keep it fairly concise for the external affairs portion of our update. Some of it has already been discussed a little bit yesterday, as the bulk of our focus, at least between Lindsay and myself these past few months, has been on the State of the River meetings that we've been doing this last quarter in the season. As mentioned in our update, we have mapped out 12 State of the River events for this spring season. As of today, we have accomplished 5 of those, as again was mentioned in part yesterday, and they've been a really great way for us, as Lindsay and myself are being a new part of the River District, have gotten out in the community, been able to engage with partners and community members and connect with directors in each of their counties when available. And so we're really looking forward to continuing that process as we move forward. It's been also very clear that the community has been very desiring of these types of events for a while, coming out of the COVID season, meeting in person, but also just coming together as a community, as so many dire headlines have been coming out around the Colorado River system. And so it's been wonderful as a EA team and as part of the River District to be able to meet these community members, be able to provide them with some big picture perspectives. Our River District presentations have centered on the big river issues that were talked about at length yesterday, making sure folks in each of our communities understand what's happening in the big picture with the Colorado River Basin as a whole, how that affects us locally here on the West Slope, and how the River District is engaged through our mission at both the intra and interstate levels. So we've gotten a lot of great feedback from community members about these presentations and kind of that better understanding. And then it's been really wonderful to work with local partners to see what's happening on the ground in each of these communities, and then connect folks with local division engineers and hydrologists as well. So again, we've accomplished 5 of these since the writing of our memo. We've had 2 more. Last week, we had our Grand Junction State of the River for Mesa County, and then our Rio Blanco State of the River in Rangeley. Both were great successes from what we've heard, and it was wonderful being in those communities and connecting with our directors. Overall, these last 5 events, we have estimated that we've had about 465 people come out to attend these events, in just these 5 events total. So it's great, and it really shows the desire for the community to come together around these issues. Our next one will be May 3rd here in Glenwood Springs for our Middle Colorado State of the River. Then May 16th will be our Lower Gunnison State of the River event in conjunction with the Gunnison Basin Roundtable meeting. We have our Grand County State of the River on May 17th and that following day. And then our Summit County State of the River will be May 24th. And then we'll have 2 in June. Our Eagle River Valley State of the River will be June 2nd. And then an Upper Gunnison State of the River in conjunction with the Gunnison River Festival on June 9th. So those are all of the ones slated. We have them opened up for RSVPs on our website, and we've been advertising in print newspapers for each of them, as well as doing boosted advertising on social media and advertising through our news drop. So, and then through local partners who are participating as well. So we're really excited to continue this series. And as Director Whitmore noted yesterday, a lot of people are wanting even more from the discussions that have been coming out of these events. And so where appropriate, we're also letting people know that our annual seminar event is slated for Friday, September 16th at Colorado Mesa University, where we held it last year. So that is booked, and we will be sending out save the dates for that event, but we're letting folks know about that to mark their calendars at each of our State of the River events as well. So hopefully that event, we can bring a lot of the people we've been meeting at State of the Rivers to that event to engage even at a deeper level with a lot of these issues and discussions. And then our team has been continuing on all of our usual fronts as well. And we've seen a great uptick in our engagement on social media. We credit that to our regular posting and also a lot of geo-targeted boosted posts for State of the Rivers and other events. So we've seen an increase in audiences, people following our pages and engaging with our posts. So that's very exciting. I'll turn it over. Lindsay, is there anything else? I think you covered it.
Any questions? I think everybody's, I know, as I said yesterday, the turnout in Uray County was great. Everybody was very appreciative. The plain dealer was appreciative as well. And I think you're right. Everybody's just anxious to do these in person again. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just want to commend the team. They're really doing a tremendous job organizing and carrying these events off. Keep in mind that both Lindsay and Mariel have never had the pleasure of sitting through or participating in in-person States of the River. They were just told about them and sent off on their own to do them. And that's not entirely true that they were sent off on their own, but they've done a tremendous job. And really also involved a number of the other staff members in that effort. And it's been great to see them step in and not miss a beat and really help bring out the information and work with our partners locally. And as you all know, from my perspective, it is really important for our staff to be out on the ground in the counties, meeting with folks. And so I just think that it's the investment of time and resources that they're making right now will pay off great dividends as we move forward. So
I would echo that praise. These two have worked their tails off to get this State of the River schedule. It's worth noting, this is a larger State of the River schedule than the river districts have done. So used to be 6 to 8 scattered throughout the district. We've got 12 this year, and yeah, they've really worked their tails off to make that happen.
we did temporarily increase it during the lead up to 7A to 11, but they are running 12 this year, so.
Anything else on information and outreach?
I just have a question. So you guys get any, have you been getting any feedback to modify the program or something, you know, as you move? I mean, you have, I assume surveys, people filling out responses.
That's a great question, Director Munger. We haven't sent out any surveys, but we have had people email us after the fact just to let us know that they appreciated the presentations, and we've talked to attendees afterwards as well to get their take. We have had a lot of people appreciate kind of the breakdown of information, very complex information by all of our presenters at each event, and so we haven't had cause to shift too much in our planning for future ones, but each State of the River event, we very intentionally cater to that local community, working with local partners, making sure that the topics that are important to each community are addressed in there. And we did have a field on our, we do have a field on our RSVPs for each of our State of the River events where folks can comment about issues that are most important to them right now and things that they're seeing on the ground. So we are collecting that information and having it kind of push us towards thinking about what we might do in the future.
Great, thank you.
All right. Zane,
Jump in on state affairs.
please.
All right. They don't want to be in the line of fire. Well, this should be a rather quick state affairs update. We don't have bills for your review. We're starting to see the details of the ARPA dollars coming out. It does sound like these one-time federal dollars are not going to go to the water plan because of the requirements for the tracking and expenditure requirements. I will say I'm a bit disappointed that we didn't see those dollars going to CWCB or to the WSRF accounts. This is the second time in as many years where we've had a significant tranche of federal dollars that could have gone to the water plant, but due to lack of capacity and spending plans, and again, requirements for those federal dollars to be spent within certain timeframes. It looks like they're going to allocate 60 million to the Rio Grande and Republican River acquisition of essentially permanent dry up of lands in those areas to ensure that those two river basins can meet their interstate compact compliance needs. We're going to likely see 20 million to the to wildfire recovery and watershed health efforts, which I think this organization would be supportive of. I can bring you details on that before the end of the session as details become available. But beyond that, really, sine die is looming on the horizon at this point. Tomorrow will be the 100th day of the session, meaning there are only 20 working days left. Weekends, there are 6 weekend days between tomorrow and the 120th day. The legislature doesn't usually work on weekends. There will be some long nights coming up, maybe a couple of Saturdays, but that reduces the total working days significantly as well. The Joint Budget Committee did complete the reconciliation of the $36.4 billion appropriations bill, and both houses have readopted it. One thing that I think a lot of us under the dome are starting to realize is that with term limits, we're going to see a significant loss of leadership and institutional knowledge in both the Senate and the House. Speaker Garnett, who has been a friend of ours and a friend of the water community, is term limited, as is Majority Leader Escar. On the Senate side, Chris Holbert, the Senate Minority Leader, and Senator Cook, the Assistant Minority Leader, are both leaving due to term limits. Carrie Donovan, of course, who has chaired the Senate Ag Committee for a number of years, will be leaving in 20 days. And so there's going to be a lot of conversation, I think, amongst the lobby corps and with individual members about ensuring that we have the right folks to help represent our issues on the Western Slope and as a water community as a whole within leadership positions in the coming session. So I will say we're beginning to talk with committee staff on the interim schedule for the year. One update for you on Senate Bill 029, the investment water speculation bill that we discussed over time for the last 100 days, is that it does not appear as though it's going to come out of committee. It is calendared tomorrow. My conversations with the sponsors indicate that they are going to punt back to the interim committee for another conversation this summer. I've found it a little bit difficult to keep you all in the loop on that, because it seems as though every time I present a new strike below to you that's being circulated by a sponsor or another organization, it's shot down and another one is there in its place. But I think since the last update I sent to you, we've seen 3 concept strike belows. None of them managed to develop consensus or at least galvanize support that would allow that bill to move out of Senate Ag, or definitely not through the House Ag Committee. So I expect that bill will either be postponed indefinitely tomorrow, or it will die on the calendar. Expect more interim conversations on speculation this summer. There is likely with Senator Cleve Simpson from the Rio Grande Water Conservation District in the Senate. I expect he will want to have an interim conversation on Trans Mountain diversions. And I think that we as a staff at the River District will be prepared to engage in that conversation and try to inform it, at least represent the West Slopes concerns related to TMDs. Beyond that, the last update I have for you on state affairs is it was in your written report, but there was a coalition of non-governmental organizations in the environmental community that had been toying with a recreational in-channel values reach proposal. I outlined that for you in your memo. Staff participated in a handful of stakeholder conversations that were hosted over the last few months. It does not look like that's moving forward. They would like to have a conversation on that concept during the interim as well.
And I just want to take a moment to commend Zane carrying out the board's direction on the South Platte bill. Just want to indicate he caught quite a bit of flack from a couple of term limited senators, and just appreciate that Zane is on the front lines, and sometimes our direction to him does create some bruises, but he does a great job absorbing them. So
Take them with a smile.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, Director Rivas.
So what's the latest on the collective bargain?
I don't have an update on that. I'd be happy to dig in and get you something.
We have to take a look at that, because that is going to have a huge impact on the counties, which are the primary funding source for us.
well, I appreciate that we generally don't steer out of our water resources in our it is a matter of concern for our county governments. Our funding stream really is separate from the county governments. It's a direct tax.
It is, but the other day, for example, you mentioned, well, Mason County hadn't upped up yet with the commitment on, I forget what it was. First thought in my mind is, that's a long time coming if this collective bargaining goes through. We estimate first year between 11 and $15 million just for Mason County. So it does impact you, and it's not property tax. But my guess is that there are very few counties in our river district, one that have appropriated for anything like that. And it will have a big impact. So that's why I asked.
I'd be happy to chat with Gail Berry, one of our 2 contract lobbyists, just eyes and ears down at the Capitol for us. She keeps a closer eye for other clients on bills that aren't within this House and Senate Ag or energy and natural resources. I'd be happy to get you an update.
And in fact, I'm not so sure that as a district, you may be covered.
It's true.
I don't know.
Honestly, given the district's policies and perspectives with our employees, Maybe I'm missing the point, but I'm not concerned about its impact on the district. But I am aware that it potentially.
Ask Director Curry, I don't know if her clients or others are tracking.
Is it okay if I answer? Sure. The draft bill that I've seen, and they're still not, I'm hearing it will be introduced. It would affect counties and higher ed, is what I saw last time around.
And my understanding is that CCI is strongly opposed. How about federal affairs? Anything on that?
Federal affairs,
Oh, so before we leave there, if we could, I'm really struggling with the recreational in-channel values for each. You know, so I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a pragmatic type of guy, but I'm really struggling. So you don't have to build anything, you don't have to do anything. And it's just, I mean, that's what it seems like, is we're just gonna go out there and designate this a beautiful river. And so then it now has protection. So I don't know where this is going and what, and I mean, you know, we struggled hard enough with the risks, I mean, anyhow, and then building the structure, and then so that you end up having something that you could quantify how much water you were gonna use and the rest. I'm just really struggling with this whole concept, so.
I think everybody was struggling with it. The one thing that I was asked in front of the interim committee last summer when we discussed this was, as the River District heard from its constituents or communities about a need for this type of program. I've not been approached by any of our communities that see a need for this type of program in statute. I will say the original plan for some of the proponents was to try and open up the risk statutes. I think we're very glad that they're not pursuing that approach.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just wanted to take on that.
Yes.
Just, it's a quick point of clarification. The concept that was being discussed would be a designation of a reach, but there would be no associated appropriated water right with that reach. So there wouldn't be built-in protections or any sort of priority associated with the reach. How it would get used and whether it was worthwhile is a whole nother discussion that we don't apparently need to have right now because it's not, doesn't appear to be moving forward. But the concept didn't involve the designation of or any sort of adjudication of the water right.
Well, it is moving forward into.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. I mean, which same will obviously follow.
It seems to me that this is how they open the door. Promise, look, no impact and so on.
And we did, I think, prior to your arrival on the board, Director McGinnis, we had a conversation beginning of last summer on that, and staff tracked it closely and engaged with not only our West Slope delegation, but other members of the interim committee. I feel comfortable that we can stay in front of this and play a contributing role in ensuring that it doesn't negatively impact our water users. If it moves forward at all.
So do we have policy statements?
We do, and in fact, that's, we need to cover federal affairs,
We're
but
gonna try
one of the
and get to
reasons that
those.
the recreational water rights policy statement doesn't have a lot of changes in it this go around is because it served staff very well in front of the committee last time.
Yeah, okay, very good, thank you.
Federal affairs.
Appropriation season is in full swing. The earmark process is underway. Both, they're calling them congressionally directed spending requests. We're aware of 3 in the district that we've engaged with Senate staff on. One is for the Maybell project. Where am I looking here? And sorry, Tom's over there. The other is for the Lake Irwin Outlet project. That's application submitted by the Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District. And then the last is the Sheriff's Reservoir project that you discussed with Amy earlier. Andy and I have been engaged with Senate staff pretty frequently of late. I'll be in DC in May to meet with our House delegation staff and members and staff from committee and agencies. Andy may or may not be able to join me for that, but We've, I think, been doing a good job of staying on our delegation's radar and ensuring that they know what our needs are within the appropriations and the budget process as a whole. In your memo, I've listed a couple of key personnel that have been added at Interior and the Bureau. On the legislative radar for you, it occurred to me last night as I was preparing for this that we've discussed the Upper Colorado and San Juan Recovery Basins, Upper Colorado and San Juan River Basins Recovery Act, Senate Bill 3693. I've not asked you for a formal position on it. We've been listed as a supporter in the press and elsewhere, but I thought I would bring that to you for a potential action. This bill would essentially give us a 1-year extension of the drop dead date on the Upper Colorado Recovery Program, as well as the San Juan River Recovery Program, and essentially allow stakeholders in the upper basin to work with committee staff and others another year to try and identify a more sustainable source of funding for those programs in the face of declining power revenues from Glen Canyon Dam. I would recommend that the board support this. I think as a proud program participant and a financial supporter of that program, it's clear where our interests lie. But if it suits the board, a formal position of support that I can carry back to DC in May would be helpful.
All right. Is there discussion on that? Is there a motion to support staff's recommendation? So moved. Moved by Chandler Henry, second by Curry. Any further discussion or questions for Zane about the 1-year extension? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay.
Buried at the bottom of your federal affairs memo is just a mention that we do have new contractors in DC. After a number of years with working with Water Strategies, we decided to move to Natural Resource Results, talented team that can provide, again, eyes and ears for us. Really, it's more of a research and reporting role for Andy and me, as we can't be out there on the ground as often as we would like or need to be at times. They've got it's a small dedicated team. Sarah Tucker is a principal that we'll be working with, former committee staff on the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee, worked for 3 consecutive chairs on the committee, Bingaman, Wyden, and Landrieu. Mitch Butler, who Director McGinnis may remember is one of his senior legislative aides in the House, is another partner there that we'll have access to. But really just helping us keep a close eye on what's happening in those conversations in the hallways and with committee staff, that by virtue of the fact that we're not out there other than quarterly is helpful information for us to have. So excited to be working with Natural Resource Results. Garrett Durst, their senior associate, will be my primary point of contact, but Mitch and Sarah are both there to help us as well. So, anything else on federal affairs?
Yes.
Just real quickly, yesterday we talked about Lake Powell and the water situation, but we really didn't talk about the power situation and what the magnitude of that. And I'm still struggling to figure out does anybody know? I mean, we keep hearing these horror stories. Well, it's kind of like the freeze up when they had the freeze up in Texas, it raised our electric rates by double. I'm just curious to what's going to happen when we're not going to be able to, and we haven't seen anything coming down the pike. I mean, we've been talking about the water. We know what's going to happen with the water, but I'm just struggling, and maybe this isn't the appropriate place and the time, but I just to be in the know, I'd sure like to know what's going to happen with.
Yeah, we've engaged in a lot of those discussions, Director Monger, and power production on Glen Canyon Dam is somewhere between 60 and 70% of its historical production this year because of the levels in Powell. I think that the significant risk of falling below 3490 exists, and there's a bit of leeway in some recent information that we've seen from the Bureau of Reclamation that they may still be able to make some power after that point. interesting. But our, our best informed understanding is that many of our rural co-ops and some of our towns that have their own electric grids here on the western slope or utilities depend heavily on that federally subsidized power coming out of the dam. And we expect their providers, Tri-State being one of them and Mean being another, to find themselves out on the open market, either themselves or through WAPA, purchasing much more expensive power and competing with others in the open market in a non-subsidized environment. And so I think that unfortunately, we can anticipate pretty significant power hikes. I think that, has the perverse effect of during times of drought and diminished crop and returns from agricultural products of increasing pumping costs in areas like the lower Yampa and other places where we have significant pumping going on, or many of our water users who have installed pivots. I think Director Ely brought up yesterday the unfortunate situation where power costs are going to really start to matter to our ag producers as well as our all of our residents in the district. Not sure there's much we can do about that when the water's not there to produce the power. It's not there, and so helping push for long-term structural solutions that include the reduction of consumptive use in the lower basin, as frankly, as you pointed out, in our own in the upper basin to help balance the system is what makes the most sense.
Yes, Director McGinnis.
So tell me, Mark, what about the residents, the homes? I mean, is there power to replace that somewhere, or if they had to shut those off in the next month? Or California, I mean, you hear these numbers where 20 million homes or whatever depend on that kind of power.
The rolling, I mean, are we going to see rolling blackouts and that kind
Well,
of thing?
yeah, I'm questioning whether.
I've not seen that as a threat, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It may be something that people aren't really talking about just because it's still real concerns, but
I mean, the price is one factor, but even.
just availability of that.
Yeah, so it would be, I mean, is there?
And we have not heard that in anticipation of no power being available or situations where there would not be sufficient power to power the grid. But again, I'm, not our primary focus, so we can look into that and try to understand that as we move
I'm
forward.
just curious.
And I think by next quarterly meeting, we'll be in a better position to have more details to share related to the post 2023 funding proposals for the Upper Colorado Recovery Program, which those funding proposals are closely based on the estimates that WAPA and the Bureau are putting out. Those conversations are occurring behind closed doors right now, but I think we'll have public information and a clear outlook on what that looks like. And I'd be happy to carve out some time during our federal affairs briefing in July to discuss that.
Any other questions on federal affairs? All right, you want to launch into the policy discussions?
Policies.
And saying, just to be, so I'm really clear, we do not have any action at this meeting, is that correct? On
This is
policies?
your first time reviewing because we did push this off the agenda in February.
Right.
So no actions. I wanted you to have a clear picture of where staff has seen the need for some significant updates to a few of these policies.
And so our task for today is to provide staff with comments, any suggestions for further revisions, and then this will be back on the agenda in July for approval, because as you know, we never adopt policies on the first reading. It's always on the second.
And on the third.
And
fourth.
sometimes on the third or fourth, yes, agree. But so no action today. This is for comment.
If you can scroll down to the first policy, Stephanie. The water plan policy had not been touched since 2015, largely because that was an evergreen statement on the development of the Colorado Water Plan from back in 2015. With the update to the plan coming this summer, staff noted that this was in need of some refinement. So there's a good amount of red ink in this, but I think it's consistent with where we've heard this board in past conversations, and my recommendations, which are also include the recommendations of Andy and Peter, are redlined in the policy for your review.
Okay, so Colorado Water Plan. Everybody had a chance to look at that or look at it now? And
Keep in mind, this policy, Lee and I are not quite sure how this happened. It's not been revised since 2015. They're supposed to be revised every 3 years. This seemed to have fallen through the cracks. The major blood on this document is the result of the fact that in 2015, the water plan hadn't quite been adopted yet. And we're now, many years later, it's undergoing a revision to the water plan already. So we are updating and recommending some significant updates just to reflect where that water plan is in the process.
yes, Director Chandler Henry.
Thank you, President Whitmore. Yeah, I think this looks like a great update. It brings it current and it keeps what I think is the most important statement that says the district and its constituents must be intimately involved in the refinement and implementation of the plan. And that's really our platform to stand on as we try and affect that plan as it moves forward.
Yes, Director Gray.
So I'll just bring it up. I'm not sure how it fits in with the draft and the strike throughs that I'm seeing, but a part of the Colorado Water Plan was the 1177 process, and part of that was the IBCC, which several of us have been on or are on, and it's been basically not used. And I don't know if we need to put anything in our statement to that effect, or just have a discussion, but honestly, it's beginning to look like it's a non-issue, it's a non-starter of any kind. Others that are on it or been around it can weigh in, but and us putting it in our policy might make any statements might not be appropriate either. I'm just throwing it out there, maybe for information too to any of you guys that aren't.
I have heard that elsewhere, so perhaps your suggestion would be adding a sentence that says the district supports involvement of the IBCC in implementation of the plan.
And according to the
Refinement and
the Act, the 1177 Act, rather than some other version.
does anyone take issue with that suggestion? Great. Okay.
I'd be
Zane,
happy to.
You've
include
got
a
the
statement
sense
on
of that?
Within the statement, I would note that within the background and discussion, 1177 is unpacked, but within your actual policy statement, I'll develop a sentence or two for you.
perfect. Okay. Anything else anybody sees that needs refinement or revision? Okay, let's move on to in-stream flows.
In-stream flows, you may remember that my predecessor, Mr. Treese, brought this to you a couple of years ago, but there was a lack of consensus on the board about how to approach it. And ultimately, I think Andy flagged that it was out of line for its 3-year review. It was ahead of schedule. So we're bringing this back to you. I have only made minor changes to it to essentially highlight the passage of House Bill 1159, which was a priority bill for this organization 2 years ago, which protected the historic stock watering from a call by the in-stream flow. I would welcome your input on this. I think the policy as it is does serve staff well, and it gives us a clear statement that when in-stream flows are brought up at the Capitol or elsewhere, we can rely on. But welcome thoughts or advice on whether you think this needs
any significant changes.
Director Curry.
Thank you. And it's an informational request or information request. Do we have, I noticed elsewhere in our meeting yesterday and today, we talked about other entities making releases out of reservoirs for environmental purposes or in-channel purposes, and how we wanted to preserve that because we're already doing that, I think mostly out of Elcud, but and Root Eye also maybe. Do you want to keep this limited to the state held in-stream flows and, you know, keep it kind of confined that way? And then those that, or do we need to express that we like the idea of other entities also being able to have water rights for this purpose?
If I could, I think that concept is already embedded in the second paragraph, second sentence of the second paragraph of the policy. Wouldn't be opposed to making that more express, but the concept of that the district supports alternatives to the in-stream flow process to achieve environmental benefits.
That's what you're getting at.
That's-
Okay, it looks like it's covered then. Okay, thanks.
Other suggestions, questions, concerns on this policy? Yes, Director Vandenberg.
I haven't specifically found it in here, but there should be sound science or whatever you want to say that should be used to determine where it's appropriate for in-stream flows, because I've seen some in-stream flows be designated for streams that don't flow but maybe once in 10 years. There's no reliable water source for it, and there's no water usage there, so why put one there? That's something that I've seen. And it seems fairly open, and maybe this isn't relevant to our position here, but it seems like anybody can come forward and recommend an in-stream flow as well.
I think that's a good and valid comment. Yes, Director Winery.
And to chime on to that, I mean, like Hinsdale County is 97% publicly owned and we're 50-some% wilderness study areas. The federal agencies have put in stream flows, a lot of them inside wilderness boundary areas or primitive areas, right? And to a certain extent, so they're hugely protected, the in-stream flow right. I mean, there's no way you're going to get a diversion. What it does do in tackling, I got to figure out how to say it. The in-stream flow, if it's small enough and they've gotten down to where it's 1 CFS and things like that, it becomes then permittees and stock water. That's the rub, because somebody's sheep or somebody's cattle are drinking that water and it's 1 CFS water. July or whatever they put, went back to where his science-based piece is. Now there could be a conflict. I'm not saying there is one, but there could be one. And so that's the question I have is, and I think that's maybe where you were somewhat, maybe not, but it's a great program, but why, to be very honest, I've never had a great explanation why you're putting one in a wilderness area right up to the line of the wilderness area and it stops. Because you can't get a diversion. So that, I mean, I don't know how to tactfully say that, but that's my, I don't know how that fits in this.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, most of those are through federal requests to
They are.
CWCB. So maybe it goes again to the scientific basis rationale.
I think that
Yes,
we
Director
can work on some language in the policy. Let me just ask, you like to see it in the language of the policy itself or in the background area? It doesn't, either way.
Could be in there.
I'm amendable to that, yeah.
Director Monger?
Well, just real quickly, I support in-stream flows. I mean, I support breathing clean air and drinking clean water. So, but at the same point in time, I don't think anywhere in here, I still think the word minimal amount required needs to be in there somewhere. Minimal amount required to achieve the purpose. That's, and again, I support that. But again, I don't think Director Gray and we don't need to have in-stream flows that send water down to Utah either. So I think we want to make sure we have a balance in there. I think that somehow that concept is in our plan.
All good points, because I think if you look at the history of this legislation, I think, this goes back to the early 70s. There's been now a long period of time for the CWCB staff to evaluate streams in the state of Colorado and determine the minimum amount necessary for the protection of the environment. And at what point have we kind of done most of that work, or is, our new appropriations primarily just, to keep staff continued? So I think maybe a little bit extra about some of the balance of uses, minimum, superintendent, and maybe some sort of discussion about, maintaining rather than continuing to increase might be appropriate. Director Gray and then Director Curry.
Yeah, and I guess I was just reading the second paragraph that we talked about. And I think we need to be careful that there's a beneficial use involved. There's some sort of endangered fish that's going to be benefited, or there's some reason, because it seems to me what it opens up, especially given the value of Western slope irrigation, agriculture rights, that we're opening up there could be the ability for, worst case, lower basin entity to pay for drying up agriculture and just in the river and send it down to Powell. And so far, that's not, you lose your water right if you, we never have had the ability to prevent Doug from just saying, pay me more to not irrigate than to irrigate. But if there's not some beneficial use involved, at least he's threatening his own water right by abandonment at some point. If you go through the loan program, I think some structure needs to be around it personally, and maybe we should spell it out in our statement.
I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't support minimum stream flows. I think, as Director Monger has said, we all support them, and we all understand the importance of minimum stream flows for tourism and for recreation, and just because that's our way of life. So I don't think there's anyone who doesn't support them. I think it's just a matter of balance and tweaking a little bit and making sure that there's still good science, that there's still, good.
But that there is an environmental benefit.
And that there's
and there's been something done that establishes what that amount is.
I think, very good point. Very good point. Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you. So since Zane relies on these and the staff relies on these policies, Zane, I'm thinking about all the bills that have come up where we've had a debate over enhancement of in-stream flow decrees and going beyond the minimum, So if this were to articulate what Director Munger was saying, and if you got that kind of direction, then I can just picture what'll happen down the road when a bill comes forward. I just was reminding myself that this is direction for the staff, and if this issue does come up in the General Assembly where he could literally be asked, where does the River District stand on enhancement language versus minimum language? So it's just kind of reminding myself that that's how this will get used.
And it has been, even without the reference, it certainly has been.
Every session I've been.
Yeah.
Peter,
But yeah, I mean, just as a reminder, the structure of the in-stream flow program allows the existing structure, existing statutory authority, allows the Water Conservation Board to appropriate in-stream flows for, effectively minimum stream flows to protect the natural environment. And also allows the Water Conservation Board to accept donations or enter into leases, and other means of acquisition of water rights to improve the natural environment. The River District historically has supported, with the limitations that are built into the existing structure, the ability for the state to do that. Obviously, there are potentially very important reasons why you would want them in any of the states ability to exercise that authority.
I think that's correct. So can you take those comments and fine tune it just a little bit? Other comments or suggestions for this one? Okay, Endangered Species Act.
Endangered Species Act, the policy statement of the board remains largely intact. There was a bit of reorganizing by staff. The most red ink is really on the background and discussion section, which was a bit outdated and just needed an overhaul in staff's opinion. I think it's generally consistent with the facts and the history of the Endangered Species Act. You'll see significant red ink there, but the statement itself remains largely intact.
Comments, questions, suggestions?
I guess the big 4-paragraph strike through. Second page, I guess it is. I kind of liked it being there.
Which one, Tom?
So it'd be, yeah, the second page where it starts in red, but it's struck through the ESA administered primarily by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Actually, the paragraph that begins unfortunately, but
Those four.
those 4 paragraphs, I thought I kind of liked those in there. And was there a reason for taking that?
So there were some inaccuracies there with regards to the statement that it had not been reauthorized. The program has been reauthorized many times.
Okay.
Personally, or not personally, professionally, when you look at the ESA, I think using statements like the ESA has largely failed to achieve recovery and delisting of imperiled species. I think that's contradictory to our experience with the Upper Colorado Recovery Program, with many of the successes attributed to it. I think this is one of those controversial pieces of behemoth federal legislation that has its pros and cons. And my revision was really trying to get down to the facts of the program without making some of the failure statements or relying on the cons or the pros more, one side more than another. And most of the facts and figures that I struck were also just outdated. The background of the statement needed a significant update on the number of species and just overall facts and figures, which were pulled from the Congressional Research Service and the rewrite.
Well, I see that, and I certainly want to make it accurate, and so I would support taking out anything that's inaccurate. Maybe I'm too anecdotal here with what's going on in the Yampa, but the Lower Yampa, we've had these endangered fish forever, or since the authorization of the act, and And we refuse to take the alligators out of the swimming pool, so we're not recovering the fish because we have northern pike. So that's in the river. And everything's based on flows. We just have more flows. We have fish. And so I have a little bit of a burr under my saddle that it's ineffective in the way that it's trying to cure the problem. And so somehow to get at that and at least provide the impetus whenever possible to insert some things that actually work. Rather than just, it's all about flow. And of course, I'm revealing my biases, but some entities don't care whether it's recovering the fish. They're all about flow anyway, and it's just a tool to get more flow in the river.
Sure.
And use fish as the tool for it. So that's, I guess there's where I'm at.
Yeah, go
One
ahead.
quick comment, the introduction sentence that was included by staff does try to underscore at the beginning of your policy statement that to the point where they are no longer in need of Endangered Species Act protections. To reinforce that we believe, or that this board believes, that there should be an end goal of delisting for all of these species. So staff did try to underscore, and I think that aligns somewhat with the comments you've made, but I'm happy to provide additional commentary for the board within the statement or within the background and discussion sections.
I'd like a statement that says in some cases, at the very least, in some cases, it's been ineffective.
Peter, did you have something?
No.
I think I was just gonna tag on to what Zane said, that I think the third and fourth paragraphs in the actual policy statement really emphasize that need for a scientific basis and the need to list as well as delist. And it feels stronger to me without the failure comments, which make it feel a little biased, even though I understand that.
I do think, the list of the species has sometimes not perhaps had quite the level of scientific support that I think, and delisting the same way.
Oh, yeah.
And so maybe if we could just add something about the importance of good science in both listing and delisting, and especially with subspecies. I think some of this reflects some of the frustration that we've had over the years with some of the subspecies that, it's a 1 molar difference between the ones we're catching in our traps.
Well, I probably said that, but in the AMPA, the PBO is set to be to expire. That was to recover the fish. And there's already talk, well, we need to increase the minimum flow that's required by the PBO. And so there again, where's that water going to come from? And it's going to be protected. And so it's headed in the wrong area.
Maybe we could add something, just talking about that when species are listed, recovery efforts should include a toolbox of multiple scientifically supported recovery mechanisms, so that it's not just
It hasn't worked.
right.
That's already there, though. Those
It
recovery
is.
mechanisms, there's management objectives actually part of the recovery programs already.
There are.
They're already in there. But I know we quantified what I'm sorry, I'm not a. I'm not a
No,
lawyer,
please,
so.
please.
We quantified what based upon the flow recommendations, and we don't have a problem with those flow recommendations. But Tom is exactly right. When you're looking at what they're saying the needs are for the natural ecology needed for those fish to recover, you don't have enough, you can't put enough water in storage to meet 100% of those flow recommendations. It's a substantial volume of water. So it's almost like you got to do the best you can.
Well, sure, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the representatives there will tell you, you're right. In a dinner conversation, they'll say, you're right. They're getting eaten up by the predators. But the only tools we have is just to make more water so they have more water to swim in and try to get away.
Well, Tom, I'm skeptical of the productivity of the ESA as well, like you are, but I've had a lot of conversations, and specifically in the Green River Basin, about the timing of flows being designed. You know, we all know there's a peak in there to try to flush the gorge, to flush the spawning and the youthful ones out into the kind of the flat plains. But they're also doing timing to hit the predator species, the smallmouth bass, to disrupt their nesting and get them out of there. And so I just want to be careful. There are other strategies that they are employing with flows other than just increasing the flows for in general. I mean, there is some thoughtful science behind what they're doing, at least in certain stretches of the river.
That's a good point. And it's site specific where you have a flaming gorge above you. You can do that.
Yeah, right.
In the Yampa, we don't have the ability to do that. All we have is no flow. And so in that case, that's what I'm referring to.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what you just described there is actually what's being designed and being input within the White River. There's considerable actions in there to help get rid of, disturb the spawning beds or whatever the case may be. But it's timed.
Yeah.
You know, attacking specific spawning habitat, developing high peak shoulder flows at a specific time of year that would help create brooding areas for the fry of these species of concern and endangered species that we have. So sediment transport, we know some of these fish don't like sediment. So those are things that we're looking at. How do we move that? We got a reservoir full of it. So by the way, I'd like to move some. Yeah.
You'd like to move about 315 acre feet a year of
Well, probably to catch up, we probably need double that. So, but
I was just gonna suggest that to the extent any changes are gonna be made, that the concept of I like President Whitmore's concept of a balance of scientifically supported tools. And I think the word somewhere in there, effectiveness, should come into play as well. And I think between Zay and I, we can work with that, would be helpful.
Okay, any other comments on this one? Do you feel like you've,
I think with Peter's help, I can craft something or point at the comments we heard.
on to recreational water use?
I alluded to during my state affairs discussion, no changes from staff on this. It has served us well. It has helped to inform the policy conversation and the administrative side of that conversation at the Capitol and elsewhere. I'm happy to add points if the board so desires, but I think this is one of those policies that, as written, has served us very well.
Comments, revisions, suggestions, concerns, any? Yes, Director Curry.
Thank you. So given that we know this conversation will come up this summer, and the notion is a in-channel, wait a minute, recreational values reach. And actually, just following up on what Peter was saying about how the reach itself wouldn't have priority and wouldn't have a water right. I think at least the earlier versions of the proposal there, you could donate or acquire water for the reach. So that gives it some enforcement administrable quality. So do you feel like this gives you enough direction to engage in those discussions this summer, since it's going a little bit different direction than an RICD? It's a different concept.
I think it does, specifically the language about materially impair the ability to develop our entitlements. That was one point that I used with the interim committee. I personally do think it provides good guidance. I would caution the board against crafting your policy statements to focus on one potential policy idea that's or legislative idea that's circulating out there. I think the broader guidance, the better, for at least not just one staff member, but that's my.
No, I would agree with Zane on that. I just want to. This is today's flavor of recreational value reach. A year, 2 years from now, we're going to have a different flavor, and we're going to have to rely on our policy statement and our board's direction. And I think, as Zane said, I mean, on this recreational values reach, our staff has engaged with the proponents of that and given them a very realistic, dismal assessment of where we think their chances of success are and why we think that's, you know, the issue. So I think we have good guidance from you. We welcome additions, but I second Zane's concern about getting too specific to the current effort, because it will morph into something new.
Good counsel, as always. Any other thoughts, concerns on this one? Then let's move to water quality.
Last policy for initial review by the board is the water quality policy. Not a ton of revisions, but with Peter's help, I did make a few revisions to bring this up to date for you.
Again, questions, concerns, suggestions?
I would note the addition of number 6 was based on your conversation on water quality. Is that last quarter or the quarter prior? That was drawn largely from what I heard from the board in that conversation.
I'm good with that.
Okay. I'm not seeing anyone with concerns, so I think this one looks good.
All I have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Director Cos. Sorry, we're stealing your guys' titles with all of our new titles of staff. We have staff directors and board of directors.
Okay, what have you got for us, Summer?
So I have a request to the board for a contract with the Colorado Water Trust. As a little reminder and background, we have the enterprise 4,457 acre-foot pool in Elkhead Reservoir. The recovery program has a short-term lease for 2,000 acre-foot of that pool. As Amy described earlier, we have already applied to the river fund for a 1,500 acre-foot contract to be able to release water similar to the pilot program last year. And then accounting for evaporation, that leaves about 687 acre feet available at this point this year, assuming we get that grant from the river fund. So back in February, we came to the board with a similar request. So we're presenting here. That was for a 10-year contract. And we are requesting, based on board feedback about hesitations about a 10-year contract, we're just requesting a 1-year contract. We're bringing this to the board for 2 reasons. One is that it exceeds the 250 acre foot maximum allowable contract under the AMPA water marketing policy. And secondly, because this contract request is, it differs from our standard contract. So our standard water marketing contract is a take or pay contract where the contractee pays for the water, whether or not it's released for them or not. And this differs from that. So the water trust would only pay for water that's actually released from the reservoir. But the flip side of that is that there's not as much of a guarantee that that water will be available if they want it. So, so this water remains available until to other water users until it's released. And that it is most likely they would want it released in the late season to augment stream flows. So we're recommending this because it enables these in-stream flow releases, but it maintains our capability to still contract that water to other water users, including consumptive water users. So the enterprise will be able to sell this water or sell any remaining water of the 650 acre feet to the water trust, assuming that water is still available and hasn't been contracted to other water users. One other point of interest is that the water trust has expressed an interest in releasing this water to benefit all water users, consistent to the pilot releases. So if we run out of that 1,500 acre feet, this isn't a guarantee or anything, but they've expressed an interest that they would release their water similar to that. So it will be shepherded for only a portion of the reach, and then it would become available to consumptive uses.
Okay, Hunter, thank you. So as I understand it, this is if the water is available and hasn't been used by other people, we would make it available, 1-year contract. Other questions? Yes.
I guess Upper Yampa's working has something like this as well going on. Now we've got the River District out of Elkhead doing something like this. Are you folks talking here? I mean, in our, that you're be coordinating these efforts here, so we're not doing duplicative tasks, and if there's some extra water down in there, you just have to dump on top of each other. I mean, it's water
Yeah,
management.
it's definitely, we coordinate a lot, and that was actually the reason for the initial 10-year request in February, is to match up with the contract that the Upper Yampa holds.
Okay.
So there's also, I mean, I've been having conversations with Andy on your staff, with Alice Mueller Water Trust, and also during the late season, we all get on a phone call every week and make sure that we're being efficient with our releases.
Okay, and one more follow-up question, if I may, and maybe this was more appropriate for earlier, but the conversations seem to be going together. Are we getting our transit losses figured out for getting our water from point A to point B? Because as a water manager, that's one of the things we got to do is how do we move water from point A to point B and get the end result we're looking at? So are we finding out what the transit losses from all the way up, all the way down, so we can actually account for that?
Yeah, the DWR conducted a study years ago. Scott Plummer here,
Okay.
Division 6. He might be able to comment on
And
this as
perhaps
well.
I've commented with him or visit with him afterwards.
But yeah, they've been putting a lot of work into trying to figure out what these transit loss numbers are. We rely on them for that.
Okay, yes.
So just to fill in a couple holes, the Upper Yampa, we came up with a 3-tiered approach to the water. And the first tier is a take and or pay no matter what, it's a small amount, so they pay for it every year. And it's a 10-year contract being released with maximum 5 during 10 years based on statute. And then the second tier is a different number of additional water that can be available, but it's not a pay even if you don't take. So the first tier, they pay whether they take it or not, just for us to guarantee that it's going to be there. And then the second water is different. And then the third water is even cheaper. And it's if the water is available there as well. So that's kind of what we're doing. But, we think that, we already give a discount for the price for this environmental water. So if they want to have it protected, and so it's in the reservoir, they need to pay for it to be in the reservoir. And then the second tiers, if it's available, we'll release it. And you're right, and DWRs, they've adjusted down their transit losses a bunch. They originally had a really high number, Erin did, and that's number's been reduced down. I think she feels is more reflective of what it really is.
Director Gray.
So this is giant steps forward in the last 5 years of utilizing the storage we have in our basin, and getting paid for it, whether it's Upper Yampa or the River District. And it's not over yet. But the Water Trust being willing to step up and also say we're willing to let this water be used for some consumption. It's giant strides in what 5 years ago we were sitting here watching our river be really low, or in 2018 it really started with the first call, and we're looking at the minimal amount of storage we have sitting there, and so this is a good thing. It's a minimal amount of water, but it's a great stride in utilizing our water and actually letting us know who's that, which happens to be us in this case, get paid.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a win-win situation from my perspective as someone who watches our enterprise balance sheet very closely. And it's also great to have the water available for the river. And if the water trust is successful in being able to fund this, that's great. Until they do, it is available. So say the governor decides he wants to buy some augmentation water again this year, then we'll sell it to the governor for that. You know, that, unfortunately, I will say you heard the snowpack and runoff estimates yesterday, and they sounded dismal, but if you want real dismal, just talk to Mr. Hummer over there, because he thinks they're way off in the likely runoff. And so his view, I have to say, given his position on the ground, I trust his investigation more than what we're hearing from out of state organizations.
Any other questions for Hunter? If not, is there a motion for staff's recommendation? Moved by Gray, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Munger. Okay, moved and seconded to approve staff recommendation, which is to authorize Andy to enter into the contract. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, thank you. And before we talk about future meetings, I just want to ask Director Richard if he's got anything he's on his mind. I haven't been very good about checking to make sure that your hand isn't up or that you haven't unmuted, so.
No, you've been good. Thanks, Marty. It's been a good meeting. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do it by Zoom with my health conditions right now. I truly appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Good to see you. Okay, future meetings. Do you want to go over that? Andy?
Yeah, just, I actually want to say that the one thing that's not listed here are the few remaining bi-weekly legislative calls, if in fact they're needed. Things do seem to be winding down on that front, but we will continue to watch and vigilantly pay attention to that. Would encourage you all to block off the budget workshop and the seminar. In addition to that lower basin fact-finding tour in early November. Really, I think that has been on the books for over 2 years, and provided we don't have another bizarre outbreak of some new strain of COVID and leading up to that, we continue down there and are excited about the opportunity to learn. I know Amy Moyer recently completed a tour as part of a water leaders program she's doing. Lower Basin has some very different perspectives about what's causing the problems on the river, and good for us all to do. Great. Anything else?
Anything else for the,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
no,
The tour idea, and I talked with Director Gray, I think a little bit about this, so I feel like I need to drive around the district and understand the Yampa and the White and the Green Mountain Reservoir and everything up that way better. Could I coordinate with staff to see if there's a way that they would recommend I do that? And maybe I just do that informally with the director. But I do feel like I need to get better educated on our own territory.
Sure, and I would just encourage anybody who's interested. Well, Mr. Hummer saying he'll love to show you the Yampa, let's just say that. And I think our directors would welcome you as well. I would say the Upper Colorado has a WECO sponsored tour coming up this summer. You all may have received emails on it.
That's right.
I would really recommend you sign up for it.
Okay.
A number of our staff members, I say number 2 or 3 of them, will be on that tour, both participating and observing. But I think that's one way. We have in the past organized tours of different portions of our basin. And Director Curry, I appreciate the reminder. This year we are focusing on the lower basin, but in the future we will try to try to find some time to tour different segments. I agree with you. Having sat on the board for 9 years, and then taking this job a couple of years later, I found driving around for work a heck of a lot more informative than looking at the maps and talking about it in a board.
I'll check the WECO
Yeah.
schedule. Thank you.
So, yeah, we have talked and Amy has expressed an interest in coming up, so I guess we have to notice it if Doug and I and
Yeah.
Kathleen were all there, but
We can note if you let us know when you're doing it.
I think I don't know about, we haven't really, Doug and I haven't talked, but I think it'd be great outside of a big group, just whatever that would be, half a dozen of us being able to get together one day and go look at all the stuff that we hear about at these meetings. Version of whatever. So
I will just remind the board, we do have lunch upstairs for anybody who's able to participate. I want to thank our staff who, many of whom are upstairs getting your lunch ready for all of their work they've done. Our staff does a tremendous job on their substantive work, but also having the meeting here is wonderful. It does take extra work from the staff. So I just think they do a phenomenal job and really appreciate the work they're doing.
I think we all do. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, let's see.